Chapter 956. The Fengling Ocean was located far away from the South Sea. There were as many islands and continents as there were stars in the sky. Although it was far away from Donghua and the other 3 continents, since ancient times, many cultivators came here to avoid disasters and pass down their teachings. For tens of thousands of years, some sects in the South Cliffs continent fled here under the suppression of the Yuxiao school and rebuilt their sections. Hence, it could be considered a place of cultivation. 2,000 years ago, a talented person appeared on the ocean. This person borrowed the legacy of his predecessors and cultivated a grotto heaven with the help of a cinnabar candle king bug. Then he used more than 100 years to merge the various sects in the Fengling Ocean into one. He established a sect, spread the teachings and recruited guests. At that time, it was so powerful that it became the #1 sect on the ocean. This person never forgot to take back the original sect in the South Cliffs continent. Hence, when the treasure in the Yuxiao school was lent out, he led his people to kill his way back to the South Cliffs continent. Relying on the primordial exotic insect, he was unstoppable in the beginning, but he provoked Lord Lingya to personally make a move. After a battle, he was defeated and died. More than half of his disciples were also killed by Jade Sky sect, and the rest fled back in panic. After such a setback, the Fengling Ocean was unable to recover. The original sect also scattered and never regained its former glory. Today, there was a flying boat on the Fengling Ocean. 2 people stood on it. The one in front was a Taoist in his 40s. He held a horsetail whisk and wore a black robe. He wore a crown and a beard. He looked elegant. The person behind him seemed to be his disciple. His eyes were moving and his limbs were slender. He looked like a quick-witted person. The flying boat arrived on an island. However, he waved his hand and said, "Disciple, stop." The disciple quickly shook the talisman in his hand and stopped the flying boat. Then he looked left and right and said, "Master, is this the place?" The middle-aged Taoist grunted and took out a bronze bell from his sleeve. He shook it gently. About a quarter of an hour later, a whirlpool suddenly appeared in the sea. A cultivator riding a white-finned whitefish flew out from the whirlpool and approached the 2 of them. With a scrutinizing gaze, he asked, "Were you the ones who shook the palace shaking bell?" The middle-aged Taoist put away the bronze bell. He cupped his hands and said, "That's right, I." The cultivator asked casually, "What do you want?" The middle-aged Taoist said, "I wish to enter the Fengling Ocean to meet an old friend." The cultivator sneered and said, "Avoiding disaster means avoiding disaster. Is there a need for such excuses?" The middle-aged Taoist didn't do anything, but his disciple couldn't take it anymore and was about to scold him, but was stopped by his master. "I have an old friendship with Frost Maple Island's Wang Island master. Please make an exception." Frost Maple Island. That cultivator's expression changed slightly. Back then, that Heavenly Passage's human sect had 2 disciples. One was Yu Hengshan. It was rumored that after his master died, his whereabouts were unknown. The other person, Wang Rao, was the founder of the Frost Maple Island sect. He looked at the 2 of them again and asked in a gentler tone, "Do you have a token?" The middle-aged Taoist took out a jade pendant shaped like a maple leaf and held it in his palm, allowing him to look at it. The cultivator stretched out his hand and wanted to take it, but the middle-aged Taoist flipped his hand and put it away. He smiled and said, "If you don't believe me, you can ask Island Master Wang to come out." He waved his horsetail whisk, and the disciple next to him took out a bottle of pills unwillingly and tossed it over. The cultivator caught it and smelled it in front of the 2 of them. He nodded in satisfaction and put it away. Then he waved his sleeves and shouted, "Just wait." Saying so, he controlled the flying fish and dove back into the ocean. The disciple gritted his teeth and scolded, "He's just a mystic light realm cultivator, and he dares to be so rude to master. If it was somewhere else, I'd definitely teach him a lesson." The middle-aged Taoist was very calm and said, "The cultivators of the Fengling Ocean have always been like this. They're arrogant and look down on everyone. It's nothing strange. Just bear with it for now." The disciple was still indignant and said, "Master, is there nowhere else to go other than this place?" The middle-aged Taoist sighed and said, "My clan was harmed by the Qinsong school in the past. Now, I heard that there are 2 more grotto heavens in the clan, and they are the enemies who destroyed my clan, so we can't go back to the 4 continents of the East Flower continent. As for the Dongsheng continent, there's the Python tribe there, so it's not appropriate. In the entire world, this is the only place where we can establish ourselves. His name was Su Ihua. Hundreds of years ago, when the Qinsong school destroyed the Su clan, 5 Yuanian cultivators in the clan used their bodies as swords to break through the restrictions and move the formation of the underwater manor. That was how he managed to escape. However, when the dragon manor fell, it was not on land, but in the depths of the sea. Although he managed to avoid the disaster, it was difficult for him to come out. Fortunately, the Su clan had the intention to establish their own clan long ago, and the treasured materials and pills left behind were enough to support his cultivation. His talent was not bad, and he managed to cultivate to the Yuanian realm in 300 years, which was why he was able to leave the manor. However, in these hundreds of years, he was afraid that the Qinsong school would find him, so he carefully traveled on the sea and did not dare to go near the East Flower continent. Although there are many clans on the Fengling Ocean, they are like a plate of loose sand. If there's a strong person who imitated the actions of that Jinren in the past, it would not be difficult to unify them. In another few decades, I have the hope of breaking into the 3rd stage realm. I originally wanted to come here again at that time, but it's a pity. At this point, Su Ihua could not help but shake his head. The disciple lowered his head, clenched his fists, and said, "I have implicated you, master. If I did not leak the technique, how would I be targeted by the Carp tribe?" Su Ihua comforted him, "This cannot be blamed on you. I have also been careless. I did not expect that other than the Qinsong school, even the Carp tribe and the Python tribe are searching for the whereabouts of the Dragon Manor." With the techniques and pills left behind by the Su clan, he knew that it would not be difficult for him to cultivate to the 3rd stage realm. However, if he wanted to rebuild his clan, he needed the Grotto Heaven. However, if he wanted to peek into this realm, he did not have the Spirit Cave, and he also needed the help of Pill Jade. Even though the Su clan left behind a lot of them, they were still lacking a lot. He could only search everywhere, but he did not expect that a moment of carelessness would cause the Carp tribe to discover his tracks. The disciple raised his head and wanted to say something, but he was stopped by a hand. "Someone is coming. There's no need to say anything. Let's act according to the situation later." As soon as he finished speaking, the seawater below parted, and a whale demon that was more than 300 feet long popped its head out. There was a soft cushion on its back, jade curtains, and golden pearls. The silhouette of a person inside was hazy, but he could vaguely make out that it was a woman. The curtain was lifted, and a fragrant breeze blew past. A beautiful woman wearing a light yellow gown came out. Her red lips were a little bit, and she smiled sweetly. She bowed to the 2 people and said, "Is this spiritual master Hua Xing? After my master received the letter from my master, he ordered me to welcome you outside." Su Ihua stroked his beard and nodded. He said, "Thank you, Martial Niece. How should I address you?" The woman said, "Thank you for asking. My name is Wen Yinling, and I am my master's 8th disciple." The disciple beside Su Ihua snorted. He knew that his master had once saved the life of the Frost Leaf Island master. Today, they came here to see each other. Even if he did not come out to welcome them personally, he should not have sent only one disciple. When Yinling's beautiful eyes drifted over, and she said, "This little Taoist is spiritual master's disciple, right?" Su Ihua laughed and said, "This is my disciple. His Taoist name is Xingjiang." When Yinling stared at him for a while, she said, "Taoist brother Xingjiang's cultivation base is really amazing. I'm afraid you have already reached the core transformation realm. If I have time, I will definitely ask for your help." Xingjiang did not wait for her reply. However, Su Ihua coughed. He could only force a grunt. That was a yes. When Yinling smiled and reminded him, "The fierce winds on the Fengling Ocean are endless, and if there is no one familiar with the situation to guide us, it will be extremely difficult to enter smoothly. This place is fine, but after we pass through the sea valley, the 2 of you must follow closely. If you get separated, I'm afraid only the Grotto Heavens people can save you." Suiwa also knew that there were fierce winds outside the Fengling Ocean. Even Yuanian cultivators could only last for 2 to 4 hours if they were caught in it. Therefore, there was a need to pay attention to when to enter and where to go. It was also because of this that the sects in the sea were not annihilated by the Yuxiao school back then. He said, "Then I will have to trouble Marshal Nice Wang." Wang Yinling giggled and said, "Reverend, you're too kind." She waved her hand, parted the seawater, and led the way into the depths of the sea. Suiwa also drove the flying boat and went in. Soon, the water returned to normal, and the sea became calm again. Not long after the two of them went in, the atmosphere flashed, and 2 Taoists appeared out of nowhere. They looked like sages, but there was a faint demonic aura around them. One of the white-haired Taoists said with a gloomy face, "He actually hid in the Fengling Ocean. This is not easy to deal with." The person beside him said, "Senior Marshal Brother, should we chase after him?" The white-haired Taoist shook his head and said, "We can't pass that fierce wind barrier, so it will be difficult for us to follow him." The other person said anxiously, "Senior Marshal Brother, what should we do now?" The white-haired Taoist said, "Since he is here, we won't be afraid of him running away. Let's go back and report to the ancestor first. With the ancestor's cultivation base, it will be a piece of cake for him to break this place." The two of them discussed in low voices for a while, and a black wind rose, and they disappeared in an instant. A few hours later, Su Iwa and his disciple had passed through the sea valley and arrived at a Shanyu manor. There were many cultivators coming and going here. Wang Yinling said, "Please rest here for a day, it won't be too late to pass the wind barrier tomorrow." Zheng Jiang said in surprise, "Didn't we pass the wind barrier just now?" Wang Yinling giggled and said, "How is that a wind barrier? It's just a whirlpool. Forget it, I won't say much, Taoist brother will know how powerful it is tomorrow." Suiwa said, "A guest should follow the host's wishes. Marshal nephew Wang said to wait for a day, so let's wait for a day." Wang Yinling said, "Zhenren, please rest first. It's not easy to come out, and Marshal nephew still has some private matters to attend to. I believe Zhenren won't mind, right?" Suiwa smiled and said, "Marshal nephew can go." Wang Yinling was delighted, and she bowed to the two of them before leaving. Suihua was about to go to the lodging, but he saw a handsome Taoist opposite him. The Taoist smiled at him and cupped his hands. His brows furrowed imperceptibly, and he returned the greeting. He then called out to Zheng Jiang, and in a few steps, he entered the guest house that Wang Yinling had arranged for him. After sitting down, he said, "Put up the restriction." Zheng Jiang did as he was told, and he turned around and said, "Teacher, is there something wrong?" Suiwa's face was a little gloomy, and he said, "Not good. Just now, did you see the Taoist outside?" Zheng Jiang said, "I saw him. Does teacher know him?" Suiwa said, "I saw him a few times on the sea. He's a disciple of Yuxiao School's Zhou family. I think he's called Zhou Zishang, but I don't know why he's here." Zheng Jiang was surprised, and he said, "Doesn't Yuxiao School have enmity with the sects of Fengling Ocean?" Suiwa shook his head and said, "Times have changed." He was a little worried, afraid that the other party was also here for the long residence. It would be fine if they were targeted by the Carp tribe, but if they were targeted by Yuxiao School, it would be difficult for them to escape. Chapter 957. Suihua had been hiding for hundreds of years. He was always on guard against anyone who could threaten him, let alone a giant like Yuxiao. No matter how he thought about it, he still felt uneasy. Thereupon he called his disciple Zheng Jiang over and asked him to find out a thing or two. When it was daybreak, Zheng Jiang returned and reported, "Teacher, I heard that Zhou Zishang and the palace mistress of Chan Palace have a close personal friendship. This time, I accepted her invitation and went to admire the flowers." Suihua said in a low voice, "In that case, it was only a coincidence that we ran into this person?" Zheng Jiang said, "This disciple thinks so." Suihua nodded and said, "I hope master is worrying too much. No matter what, as long as they entered the Fengling Ocean, no matter if it was the Carp tribe, the Python tribe, or the Yuxiao tribe, they would not be able to help. Unless the people from those grotto heavens personally acted. However, if they really made such a big fuss, it would be a clear message to others that there was something wrong with this place. As such, they would definitely not do such a thing. At most, they would send their disciples over. With a few magical treasures in his hands, even if a third-stage cultivator came over, he would be able to contend with them for a while, so he wasn't afraid. Thinking of this, he felt slightly at ease. Around noon, when Yinling returned to the guest house. Her face was glowing as if she had taken some miraculous medicine. Her internal energy seemed to have improved compared to yesterday. After seeing the two of them, she bowed and said, "Taoist master, the wind barrier is already weak. We can leave in 2 hours. If Taoist master has something to do, we can leave another day. Grow. Wind. If you miss it today, you'll have to wait for another 3 days." Zheng Jiang's eyes lit up as he asked anxiously, "Today is the middle of the moon. Could it be that this is the best time to cross the wind barrier?" When Yinling glanced at him, "How can it be so simple? The wind from the wind barrier comes from the wind caves, and the wind caves are spread all over the Fengling Ocean. There are at most tens of thousands of them, and at least 1,000 of them. They are entangled and colliding with each other, life and death are uncertain, and there are no rules to follow." Suiwa stroked his beard and said, "Rumor has it that every cultivator in the Fengling Ocean knows a technique that allows them to see the changes in the eye of the storm. Is that true?" When Yinling laughed and said, "There is indeed such a technique, but not everyone is proficient in it. Only the sect leaders of the various families had grievances. Furthermore, entering and exiting the wind formation doesn't just rely on cultivation techniques, there are other methods as well." Suihua nodded slowly, knowing that she was not lying. The cultivators of the Fengling Ocean relied on the fierce wind barrier to ward off enemies. This involved the secrets of life and death. He wouldn't let outsiders know about it easily. However, at this moment, he still wanted to explore the secrets within. He waved his horsetail whisk and said, "If that's the case, we'll follow Marshal Nephew." When Yinling chuckled and said, "Please follow me," she turned and walked out of the courtyard. When he was outside the guest house, he looked back and smiled. Then he soared into the sky. Suiwa and his disciple also followed on clouds. After dozens of breaths, they arrived at the southeast corner of the Shanyu underwater residence. There was a high platform there that seemed to be carved out of a flat mountain peak. A huge ship was suspended on it. It was 3,000 feet long and had over 100 floors. It looked like a city or a mountain that was too high to climb. When Yinling was slightly proud of herself and said, "Venerable, please take a look. This is the Danning Spirit Manifestation Great Cloud Ship. Among the hundreds of sects in the Fengling Ocean, only 3 have such a ship. We can ride on this ship and borrow the momentum of the fierce wind. We only need 1 night to return to the Frost Maple sect." Suihua looked over and said, "Such a large ship probably needs the earth fire heavenly furnace to refine." When Yinling praised, "Venerable has a good eye. This ship was refined from the earth fire heavenly furnace created by the founding master. However, after the founding master, the descendants of the heavenly furnace were unable to maintain it, so it gradually fell into disuse." When she said that, her tone was full of pity. At this moment, an old man with a solemn expression came to her side. She hurriedly bowed and said, "Greetings, Marshal Uncle Xia." That old man nodded and turned to Suiwa and his disciple. He said coldly, "If the 2 of you have nothing else to do, please return to the cabin and rest. When we arrive, I will send someone to call for you." Suiwa smiled and said, "Thank you." That old man called out, and a maid came over to lead the way. The 2 of them returned to the cabin. After sitting down, Zheng Jiang said angrily, "Teacher, I didn't expect the disciples of the Frost Maple Island Lord to be so arrogant and not put us in their eyes. Doesn't teacher have a friendship with Tongwei cult? Why don't we go there?" Suiwa's gaze was deep as he said, "Feng Linghai cultivators are cold by nature. It's the same no matter where we go. Besides, we have no choice but to go to Frost Maple Island." Zheng Jiang was puzzled. "Why is that?" Suiwa pondered for a moment and said, "Since we're here, it's time to tell you about this." He waved his hand, and a spiritual light enveloped the 2 of them, isolating them from the outside world. Then he used a secret technique to transmit his voice. Back then, the reason why that spiritual master on the Fengling Ocean was able to form a cave was because he obtained a small world from a predecessor. After the civil strife in Qinsong, our Su clan tried to find a way out and tried to find a few small worlds. Let's not talk about the others, but this small world is very likely to be near Frost Maple Island. Speaking up to this point, his eyes flashed. That spiritual master was able to fight with Lingya on the East Flower Continent, so he obviously has a lot of core jade in his hands. I suspect that it's hidden inside. This time, we can take this opportunity to find out. Disciple, a little impatience will spoil the great plan. If we can find this place, not only can we avoid the spying of our enemies, we can also find a way to move the true dragon mansion here. At that time, our Su clan will be able to rise again. Yuxiao School, Moving Star Palace. Wu Fenggu expressionlessly sat on the high seat, reading a letter. After a while, he raised his head and said, "Is this true?" The Confucian-robed cultivator said, "The person who sent the letter was a spy that our clan planted many years ago. This time, he risked his life to inform the clan, so it should be true." Wu Fenggu said in a deep voice, "Who else knows about this?" The Confucian-robed cultivator said, "After I received the news, I immediately came to find Senior Brother." Wu Fenggu looked outside the hall and said, "The Azure Dragon's remains are rumored to be somewhat magical. If we obtain the true dragon mansion, we might be able to use it to enter the cave." Zhou Zi didn't immediately report to the clan, but instead concealed this matter. It seems that he wants to enjoy it alone. The Confucian-robed cultivator suddenly stood up, his eyes burning with excitement. He said, "This opportunity cannot be missed, it will not come again. Senior Brother, if you obtain this opportunity and use it to enter the cave, our clan will be able to recover some of its decline." The Zhou clan was originally the direct descendant of the clan's founder, Yao Han. For more than 10,000 years, they were the top clans in the clan. Since then, when Master Lingya took over, their power grew. In just a few hundred years, 2 people had entered the cave. On the other hand, the Wu clan had outstanding talents among their younger generation, but they were all suppressed. The clan's 3 heavenly abodes had been in seclusion for hundreds of years, ignoring the outside world. Everyone in the clan was very worried. If this continued, the Wu clan would become like the Xie clan, becoming a vassal of the Zhou clan. The item that could be used to enter the cave was placed in front of Wu Fenggu, and it was not a small temptation. He couldn't help but fall into deep thought, considering the pros and cons. The Confucian-robed cultivator looked at him from below, not daring to disturb him. After a long time, Wu Fenggu finally said, "This matter is indeed not good to let the Zhou clan take advantage of it. Fortunately, the sect does not know of this matter, so there is still room to intervene." The Confucian-robed cultivator excitedly said, "Senior Brother, are you going to personally take action?" Wu Fenggu was very calm. He waved his hand and said, "Not so. I will patiently wait for another 10 years, then I can go to the spirit cave to cultivate. There is no need to take this risk at this time. Moreover, I believe that Zhou Zishang has a backup plan. It is absolutely impossible for him to snatch the dragon manor like this." The Confucian-robed cultivator couldn't help but be disappointed. He said, "Then what does Senior Brother want to do?" Wu Fenggu casually said, "It is not a problem. Since ancient times, it is not easy to accomplish things, but it is not difficult to ruin things. You just need to find a way to leak this information to the Qinsong school. There is no need to worry about the rest." The Confucian-robed cultivator immediately understood. He said, "Senior Brother, good plan. I will do it now." However, a few days later, the news of the Su clan's remnants appearing in the South Sea was spread to the table of Qin Feng, one of the 10 first seats of the Qinsong school. Because the matter was too big, he felt that it was difficult to deal with it. Moreover, he really had to focus on dealing with the devil sect, so he personally went to the floating heavenly palace and reported the matter to the sect master. Half a day later, Wei Zihong, who was still cultivating in the clear nether heavenly lake, received a flying letter. After reading it carefully, he took out a talisman, placed it on the incense table, and silently prayed. After a while, the talisman disappeared. He bowed a few more times, then took a few precious treasures and left the residence, heading straight to the South Sea. Outside the 9 heavens, Zhang Yan sat cross-legged on a mass of chaotic xianqi, wandering in the vast void. Because he did not use external objects to fly, there were xianqi that tried to invade him at every moment. However, as soon as it came into contact with the xianqi around him, it kept melting away. After an unknown period of time, he felt that there was some obstruction between the circulation of essence qi and dharma power. He summoned the moon-crossing boat, went inside to absorb the core jade, and meditated. About half a month later, he was full of energy again. He silently observed, and his dharma power grew slightly. He nodded subconsciously. After seizing the devil form, he left the large volume cauldron and went deep into the void. On one hand, he was looking for suitable treasures, and on the other hand, he was using the xianqi to temper his body. Because of that, it was like fighting with others every day, so the growth of his dharma power was much faster than sitting in the cave and cultivating. Fortunately, he was the Duzhen Hall master of one of the 3 upper halls of Qinsong School. He had the support of a large number of core jade. Even if he had a treasure that could cross the void, it was impossible for him to use this method to cultivate. After flying for a few days, he suddenly saw a large cluster of star gravel that looked like a jade belt, floating over. He had seen many of these things on his way here earlier, so he wasn't surprised at all. However, at this moment, he noticed that there was a large piece of rock among them that actually gave him a familiar feeling. His eyes flashed, and he was about to go over to take a look. However, at this moment, his mind moved. With a look, he knew that it was a talisman that was previously given to his disciples. After he formed his own cave, he gave each of his disciples a talisman that contained a bit of his heart's blood. If they encountered a big matter, as long as they held the talisman and chanted his name, or burned incense and prayed, they would be able to transmit their God's will, allowing him to sense it. He pondered for a while. That strand of God's will was peaceful, so it was not an urgent matter. There must be another reason for the message. After thinking about it, he smiled and shook his sleeves. In an instant, an item flew out, and with the speed of light, it fell towards the 9 continents. Chapter 958. Su Yihua and his disciples spent the night on the boat. On the morning of the 2nd day, they arrived at Frost Maple Island. They wanted to pay their respects to the island master Wang Rao, but they heard that he had gone to the Chan Palace Flower Festival and would only be back after a few days. Thus, they could only wait at the inn at the foot of the mountain. After Wang Yinling brought the 2 of them to the island, she was considered to have completed her task. She gave them a few words and disappeared. For 7 days, nobody bothered about the 2 of them. Until half a month later, when Wang Rao returned from the flower festival, he summoned Su Yihua to meet him. Even though this person seemed to be very courteous to him on the surface, he actually revealed a faint sense of alienation. Moreover, this person had hinted repeatedly in secret that he shouldn't tell anyone about how he'd saved him all those years ago. Su Yihua had expected this and took the initiative to ask for a quiet place to cultivate without disturbing others. He did not dare to ask for too much. Wang Rao was satisfied with his adaptability and sent him to a place called Scattered Valley Island to cultivate. When the 2 of them arrived at Scattered Valley Island the next day, they realized that the place was barren and gravel with only a few weeds. Moreover, the spiritual vigor was scattered. It was definitely not a good place to cultivate. Zheng Jiang scoffed and said angrily, "Teacher, you're right. Wang Rao is indeed a mean and ungrateful person. He didn't think that if it wasn't for teacher, he would have died in East Sea. How could he be so carefree now?" Su Yihua chuckled and said, "Although I'm here to avoid trouble, I'm also looking for that small world. The colder Frost Maple Island treats me, the easier it will be." Zheng Jiang felt indignant and said, "I know that too, but I'm still angry." Su Yihua sighed. "This disciple of mine is talented, but he's too impatient and straightforward. He doesn't have any shrewdness. When his cultivation base is higher, he must let him go out to gain more experience." Zheng Jiang said, "Teacher, it's still early. Are we going to look for that small world?" Suihua waved his hand and said, "There's no rush." He took out 3 sticks of incense and shook them gently in his hand. A wisp of smoke rose in spirals. Up above, seeing the vague outline of a cloud appear in the empty sky, he looked at it a few times, and a cold smile appeared on his face. Someone is using the far-sighted mirror technique to observe us. The all-seeing mirror technique. He was borrowing the appearance of the clouds. Using the clouds as a mirror, those with profound cultivation could see every blade of grass and every tree within 100 miles. Everything was under his watch. Zheng Jiang exclaimed, "Teacher, could it be that Frost Maple Island is up to no good?" Suihua shook his head and said, "Wang Rao was still worried when we first arrived here, so he sent someone to keep an eye on us. But since we are already here, there is no need to rush. I expect that he will leave after a while." In the next half a month, he only meditated in seclusion every day. Occasionally, he would go out and capture some small demons to be his servants. When he came back today, he raised the incense stick to take a look, but found that the big cloud in the sky had already disappeared. Knowing that it had left, he was instantly in a good mood. Although this was a deserted island, looking at it now, the blue seawater was boundless, and it gave off a feeling of boundless sea and sky. He waited patiently for a few more days. Seeing that the other party didn't return, he was finally at ease. He handed the cave to the small demons to take care of, and brought Xingjiang to look around. Although there were hundreds of sects in Fengling Ocean, there were only 3 that were the most powerful. The people in charge of the sects were all Yuanian cultivators, and Frost Maple Island was one of them. Therefore, the sea it occupied was extremely vast, and there were countless islands and reefs. Everywhere he went, he took out a talisman and cast a spell to see if there was any response. This talisman was also exchanged from a disciple of Yuheng Mountain at a high price. It was the key to finding a small world. After about 3 days, he arrived at a small island with a dense stone forest. Just as he was about to take a closer look, he suddenly felt the talisman in his sleeve tremble. Just now, he took it out, and with a swoosh, it turned into a golden light and flew away. Suihua was not surprised, but happy instead. He pulled his disciple and chased after it with his escape technique. He saw the golden light reach a stone pillar that was 30 feet tall, cast it down and disappeared. He landed and walked a few rounds in front of the stone pillar. After confirming that there were no restrictions, he lightly blew out a breath of clear air, and the stone pillar collapsed with a rumble. He waved his horsetail whisk, and the dust rolled away, revealing a hole in the ground. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, he said, "It should be here." Zhengjiang said, "Master, please wait for a moment. Disciple will go and scout first." Suihua grabbed him and said, "No need. We don't know if there are formations inside. You wait here, Master will go down and take a look." He leaped down and landed 10 feet below. He saw that he was in an underground palace. At a glance, there were countless passageways, but he didn't know which one was the right one. However, he had a way. He took out a jade crane from his sleeve and tossed it into the sky. The crane fluttered its wings and flew up. After circling 1 round, it let out a long cry and flew towards a passageway on the left. Suihua smiled and followed the flying crane for 2 hours. Suddenly, he fell to the ground and didn't move anymore. He knew that he had reached his destination. He raised his head and saw that in front of him was a big hall with cloud walls and silver stairs. In the middle, there were 2 spell altars. Behind it was a 30 feet tall stone mirror, polished to the point that one could see the reflection. His gaze turned and saw that the talisman had landed on the spell altar on the left. Immediately, a look of joy appeared on his face. He floated over and picked up the talisman. Immediately, he channeled his mana into it. Then he saw the surface of the stone mirror ripple like the surface of water rippling. He was even more delighted when he saw this. How could he not know that the door was here? He immediately circulated his mana. However, after 10 minutes, the ripples gradually disappeared. No matter how much he tried, there was no movement. His face darkened and he frowned. This place is indeed not bad. After thinking for a while, he looked at the spell altar in front of him and thought, could it be that I want 2 talismans? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it made sense. That Jinren had two disciples. Since this talisman was obtained from a disciple of Yuheng Mountain, then the other half is most likely in the hands of a descendant of the Wang family. However, if that's the case, it's a little difficult. This kind of item passed down by the patriarch will definitely be held in high esteem. It's impossible to obtain it using ordinary methods. Could it be that I have to resort to robbery? After thinking for a while, he felt that he could only go back and slowly think of a way. Thus, he picked up the talisman and went back the way he came. Zheng Jiang said, "Teacher." Su Yihua waved his hand and said, "It's not convenient to talk here. Let's talk when we get back." Zheng Jiang could see that his teacher was in a bad mood, so he didn't dare to ask any more and hurriedly said yes. The two of them flew for half a day and returned to Scattered Valley Island. However, just now when they landed, they saw a golden flying ship coming from afar. Zheng Jiang instantly became nervous and said, "Teacher, did we reveal some flaws? Did Frost Maple Island come to punish us?" Su Yihua was very calm and comforted him, "Don't panic. There are only 2 or 3 people on that ship. We're very careful. Frost Maple Island wouldn't know about it. Even if they knew, why would they only send these people?" Only then did Zheng Jiang feel relieved. The flying ship arrived on the island. A handsome young cultivator floated down from the ship and landed in front of the cave abode. Zhou Zishang? Su Yihua's heart trembled when he saw this person. He quickly thought, what is he doing here? Zhou Zishang walked over with a slight smile on his face. He walked up and cupped his hands, saying, "I've been a guest on Frost Maple Island for the past few days." However, after reaching the sea, the further south he went, the more he felt that Yuxiao was powerful. Almost every island had cultivators patrolling around it. When he passed by the southern cliff continent, he could see floating rafts and flying boats in the sky from afar. They were so densely packed that they almost covered the sky and the sun. He was also secretly shocked. Out of caution, he also stayed far away. Half a month later, he was already in front of the Fengling Ocean. Chapter 959. Wei Zihong looked at the distant sky from the sea. He could faintly see a void chi moving back and forth on the surface of the sea. He didn't know how many tens of thousands of miles it was. He knew that this should be the famous severe wind barrier. Rumor has it that if a normal cultivator was blown by this wind, their bones and flesh would immediately turn into mud, nothing would be left. Even if a Yuanian cultivator like him entered the inner room, he could at most last 100 breaths. He didn't have the intention to go up and try, but ever since the cultivators in the Fengling Ocean lost to the Yuxiao 2,000 years ago, they completely gave up on the idea of returning to the southern cliffs continent. Since then, they closed their doors and rarely interacted with the cultivators of the outside world. If they wanted to enter, they usually needed someone to receive them. Fortunately, he had inquired about it beforehand. This place was after all only a corner of the 9 continents. A lot of external items needed to be collected from the outside world. There were flying boats coming and going every day, so he wasn't in a hurry. He took out a concealment magic treasure, turned into a long smoke and circled around his body, and hid himself, ready to hitch a ride on the boat when someone came and went. After waiting in the sky for less than half a day, he saw a sea boat coming over. He used his mana and immediately saw the inside and outside of the boat. There were about 500 people on the boat. Most of them were servants and servants. There were only about 10 cultivators, but their cultivation level was low. Only a cultivator in embroidered robes had a cultivation level of core formation. Wei Zihong's purpose this time was to enter the sea realm, so he wasn't picky. He immediately used his mana. 3 clouds spread out, and the big boat was fixed in place. No matter how the wind and waves moved, it couldn't move forward even half an inch. The people inside the cabin felt something was wrong. They all came out of the cabin. He didn't hide his cultivation level. When the cultivators on the boat saw him, how could they not know that the other side was a Yuanian Jinren? They were instantly confused. They didn't know how they offended him. Wei Zihong looked down and said, "Who is the master here?" The cultivator in embroidered robes came out of the crowd and said with his head lowered, "I am Li Yitong, the owner of this boat." Wei Zihong said, Are you going to the Fengling Ocean? Li Yitong replied, this lowly one's boat is heading towards the Fengling Ocean. Wei Zihong nodded and said, then it's on the way. I'll borrow your place for a few days. Finished speaking, he shook his sleeve and walked into the cabin. Li Yitong was stunned for a moment and immediately complained in his heart. But there was nothing he could do to stop her. After thinking for a while, he called a servant over and said, go and prepare a room for Taoist master and call a few clever maids. The manager was extremely nervous. He said in a low voice, Master. This place was still all right. When they arrived at Gentleman Island, the number of people boarding the boat was fixed. Then how should they pass the test? The Chan Palace is looking for our mistakes. The brocade-robed cultivator sighed and said, let's take it one step at a time. Wei Zihong didn't pay attention to what was happening outside. He just randomly found a cabin and sat down to meditate. After the boat traveled for 6 hours, Li Yitong's voice rang out from outside. Taoist master, we have arrived at Gentleman Island. If we continue forward, we will need to change to a bigger boat. When Wei Zihong heard this, he got off the bed and walked out. When he looked up, he saw that he was already on an island, and when he looked further away, there were countless void chi spiraling with great momentum. Some of the seawater was swept up into the sky, and as it flowed back and forth, it actually converged into numerous rivers in the sky. The rivers were white like dragons, and they crisscrossed the sky, traversing thousands of miles in the sky, and it was a magnificent sight. At this moment, his brow opened slightly and he looked out again. The scene he saw this time was different. He saw light flickering in the wind, lightning crisscrossing, swallowing the sun and spitting out the yin. The hurricane was like a dragon, roaring in the sky like a tribulation of wind and lightning. He retracted his gaze and sensed the surroundings. He roughly knew the situation here. This island looked relaxed, but in reality, there were restrictions everywhere and security was extremely tight. He thought that he had to be careful here. He wasn't afraid of the cultivators here, he was just afraid that they would clash and he wouldn't be able to smoothly enter the Fengling Ocean, so he said, lead the way. Li Yitong made a gesture and said, Taoist master, this way please. Not long later, the two of them came to the shore of the sea. There was a giant boat moored there. Li Yitong took a look and saw that his subordinates were blocked outside and couldn't board the boat. His expression changed and he walked over, asking loudly, what's going on? The manager squeezed through the crowd and came over, saying with a bitter face, Manager Zhong said that there are a few important guests on this boat and it can't take us anymore. He told us to come back next time. Li Yitong frowned, can't make an exception? I have 100 vats of fated soil on this boat and I'm about to send it to Palace Master. If it's delayed, he can't afford to bear the consequences. The steward could only sigh in despair. Li Yitong had no choice but to return to Wei Zihong's side and said, Taoist master, this boat is carrying someone else. We can only leave when the next boat comes back. Wei Zihong glanced at him and said, how long do we have to wait? Li Yitong thought about it and said, if we miss the wind season, we'll have to wait for another month. Wei Zihong said indifferently, too long. He raised his head and gathered energy in his eyes. In an instant, a spiritual light shone out and everyone on the boat became dazed. They got off the boat like walking corpses and no matter how the others shouted at them, they couldn't wake up. Li Yitong saw such a strange situation and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He pointed at one of them and said, Taoist master, this is Manager Zhong on the boat. Without him, the boat can't move. Wei Zihong casually waved his sleeve and Manager Zhong woke up with a quiver. He looked at the 3 clouds above Wei Zihong's head and his eyes were filled with fear. I heard that Li Yitong invited a guest. It must be this person. But why does this seem like the methods of the devil sect? Just now, he could clearly sense his every move, but his body didn't listen to him. He clearly had Yuaniing cultivation, but in front of the other party, he didn't have the slightest ability to resist. Li Yitong stepped forward and said, Manager Zhong, can we board the boat? Manager Zhong went back and forth here to greet people. Whether it was knowledge or insight, he was much more knowledgeable than the cultivators who hid in the Fengling Ocean all day. He knew that the devil sect cultivators had strange temperaments and many of them would kill at the slightest provocation. They didn't come to reason with you, so he didn't dare to mention the previous matter and hurriedly said, "Okay, okay. Fellow Taoist Li, please board the boat." Li Yitong saw Manager Zhong's timid appearance and suddenly felt proud. He leaned to the side and said, "Taoist master, please board the boat." Wei Zihong waved his sleeve and went to the boat. Inside the cabin, after sitting down, not long after, he felt the boat slightly shake and knew that it had set off. From his sleeve he took out a map of the sea. Stretching out his hand, a drop of lead-silver ball appeared on the map. As the ship turned left and right, it rolled back and forth on the map, leaving a silver mark on the map. This magic treasure was called Misai Bead, and it could see the changes in the geography and heaven's secrets. He took it out now. It was to find a way to get past the severe wind barrier so that it would be convenient for him to travel in the future. After a night, at the break of dawn, the sound of the wind outside gradually subsided. He went out of the cabin. He saw that he was already on a continent. Li Yitong came over and said respectfully, "Taoist master, do you have any other instructions?" Wei Zihong said, "Just now on the boat, I heard that there is a cicada palace flower festival here. I also want to go over and take a look. Do you know how to get there?" Li Yitong was surprised and happy. He said, "We are here to deliver soil to the cicada palace, so it is on the way. Unfortunately, Taoist master is late. The cicada palace blooms for 4 seasons and 3 seasons have already passed. Now that we have passed, we can only see the last season." Wei Zihong said, "So you are familiar with the situation here?" Li Yitong immediately said, "I have some face here. If Taoist master has anything, just tell me and I will do my best to do it." Wei Zihong changed his mind. He didn't know how long it would take for him to find his own family. Li Yitong seemed to be familiar with the situation here and could be used. He said, "I am here to look for someone who hasn't been here for long. He is dressed like a Taoist and has Yuanian cultivation. If you help me find him, I can give you some benefits." When Li Yitong heard this, he patted his chest and said, "Don't worry, Taoist master. There are very few outsiders on the Fengling Ocean. If it is as Taoist master said, it should be easy to find. Taoist master, please wait for a moment. I will go and give some instructions. I believe there will be news soon." Wei Zihong made an "oh" sound and looked at him. "Then I will wait." Li Yitong clasped his hands at him and went to make arrangements. This person was indeed not boasting. In just a few hours he came back and said, "Taoist master, I heard that a month ago, a master and a disciple came to Frost Maple Island. One of them is similar to what Taoist master described. Rumor has it that he has already become a guest elder of Frost Maple Island." Wei Zihong's eyes lit up and he said, "Where is Frost Maple Island?" Li Yitong said, 3,000 miles east from here is the boundary of Frost Maple Island." Since Wei Zihong found out about the person's whereabouts, he didn't hesitate anymore. He threw a bottle of medicinal pills to Li Yitong and leaped into the sky, turning into a streak of light and flying away. On Scattered Valley Island, after Zhou Zishang left, Su Ihua thought about it again and finally decided to take a risk. He told his disciple to wait in the cave while he pierced through the clouds and arrived above extreme heaven. He took the jade pendant that Zhou Zishang gave him and circulated his magic power. With a sudden leap, he turned into a streak of light and flew away. After an hour, a streak of light came from afar. When it got close, the light dispersed and Zhou Zishang walked out. He looked at him and smiled. "Since fellow Taoist Su has come to find me, have you thought it through?" Su Ihua didn't mention this and said, "Taoist Zhou, do you know that before Taoist Xiao attacked your Yuxiao boundary, he left a small world in the Fengling Ocean?" Zhou Zishang was startled and said, "Is there such a thing?" Su Ihua said, "According to what I know, there are many good medicinal pills hidden in this small world. It's just that my cultivation is insufficient and I can't enter it. If Taoist Zhou can help me, I'll do as you said and enter Yuxiao. I'm willing to share the benefits that I've obtained here with Taoist Zhou." Zhou Zishang was immediately moved. The reason he sought out Su Ihua was because he wanted to take over the Long Manor. In fact, he did not report it to the sect. Now that there was another small world, he was even more surprised. He said, "How can I help you?" Suiwa first showed him the talisman that he had and told him the whole story. In the end, he said, "There's another talisman in the hands of the Wang family of Frost Maple. However, it's impossible to get Wang Rao to hand it over, so we can only snatch it. I wasn't confident at first, but if I can work together with Taoist Zhou, I'm confident." Zhou Zishang's eyes flickered and he smiled. He shook his head and said, "Taoist Su, you overestimate me. Wang Rao is the leader of a sect. I'm afraid that just the two of us won't be enough to snatch it." Su Yihua said, "Then what does fellow Taoist Zhou think?" Zhou Zishang smiled and said, "I'm friends with the Cicada Palace Lord. If she helps, we'll have a higher chance." Su Yihua seemed to be hesitant and said, "It's not impossible to have one more person, but..." Zhou Zishang interrupted him and said, "I know that Taoist Zhou has doubts. We can all sign the contract. Will Taoist Zhou be at ease then?" Su Yihua thought about it and reluctantly agreed. However, there was a hint of mockery in his eyes. Chapter 960. Just as Wei Zihong entered the boundary of the Fengling Ocean, a person also came from the outside. He was tall, had a square face, a straight nose, and a wide forehead. However, there was a fiendish aura between his brows. This person was called Chu Shang, and he was the person with the highest cultivation in the Carp tribe. His cultivation had already reached the 3rd stage. Chu Yu had come to seize the Dragon Manor and was afraid that others wouldn't be able to suppress Su Yihua, who had many treasures, so he sent him. However, when he reached the boundary of the Fengling Ocean, he was also obstructed by the wind. However, he had his own methods. He took out a talisman and muttered an incantation. Not long after, he captured over 100 water race cultivators in the sea. After asking a few questions, he understood the method of crossing the sea from a shark demon. He then turned into a wisp of smoke and entered its stomach. Borrowing its body, he swam under the sea and smoothly passed through the whirlpool. However, the wind outside was slightly weaker, so it was still easy to pass. The deeper he went, the stronger the wind became. It was impossible to pass through so easily, so he could only cross by boat. It was also because he had to avoid the disciples of Xian's sect on his way here and was delayed by a few days. This month just happened to be the time of the year where the wind was the strongest. There was not a single boat coming or going. Helpless, he could only sit outside and wait. Wei Zihong flew east according to the direction Lu Yitong pointed out, and soon entered the boundary of Frost Maple Island. However, when he reached this place, he could clearly see that the security was much tighter than outside. There were cultivators patrolling the surface of the sea from time to time. He only knew the general direction of Scattered Valley Island. If he searched like this, he would probably encounter the cultivators of Frost Maple Island before he could even meet the other party. After thinking for a while, he saw a deserted island not far away and landed on it. When a person who looked like a disciple passed by, he stretched out his hand and grabbed him, throwing him at his feet. He asked, "Are you a cultivator here?" That disciple didn't know what had happened at first, but when he saw Wei Zihong, he immediately panicked and said, Yes. This junior is a disciple of Frost Maple Island." Wei Zihong said in a deep voice, "Recently, a guest elder came to your island, dressed like a Taoist. He also has a disciple beside him. Do you know where he lives?" The disciple said in a trembling voice, "Senior, this lowly one's position is low. I have no way of knowing about such matters." Wei Zihong asked again, "Is there anyone here who knows?" The disciple hesitated for a moment before pointing in a certain direction. He said, "Go more than 100 li from here. There was a white sand one. He is also a guest elder of the sect, so he should know about it." Wei Zihong took a look and indeed saw a large island. Spiritual vigor revolved around it. He nodded and pointed at the center of the man's brows. The man's expression immediately became sluggish, and his eyes became lifeless. With a stomp of his foot, he turned into a streak of light and flew in that direction. When he got close to the island, he noticed that the restrictive formation was obstructing him, but it was extremely crude. In his eyes, it was full of flaws. He immediately made a hand seal and turned into a cloud of white smoke. It was like a cloud and mist, and he directly passed through it. On the island, there was an old man in white who was meditating on a rock at this moment. He felt his spirit was triggered, and he exclaimed in surprise before he stood up abruptly and said in a low voice, "Which fellow Taoist has come?" Wei Zihong appeared. He asked, "Are you White Sandwang?" The old man's expression turned solemn. Since Wei Zihong was able to enter his formation so easily, his cultivation base must be much higher than him. The old man cupped his fist and bowed, "Yes, I am. May I know why you have come to my place of cultivation?" Wei Zihong said, "I'm here to look for a person. His name is Hua Xin. Do you know where he is?" White Sandwang said, "You're here to look for spiritual master Hua Xin. If I'm not mistaken, this person is cultivating on the scattered valley island in the east." Wei Zihong asked again, "I'm new here, so I'm not familiar with this place. Do you have a sea map?" White Sandwang smiled bitterly, "I'm just a guest elder here, I don't have such a map. But I've been here for a long time, so I know a thing or two about the distribution of the islands." His lips moved, and he transmitted his voice to Wei Zihong, telling him everything he knew. After listening to him, Wei Zihong nodded at him and said, "Thank you for telling me." Then, he turned into a streak of light and flew into the sky. When White Sandwang saw Wei Zihong leaving, he felt relieved and let out a long breath. At this moment, a disciple's voice came from outside the door, "Master, just now, I think I saw a streak of light flying out, but—" White Sandwang scolded, "What streak of light? You must have seen it wrongly. Focus on your cultivation, don't get distracted." The disciple outside the door had no choice but to leave. After Wei Zihong left the island, he checked the direction and flew as fast as he could. In just an hour, he arrived at the outskirts of Scattered Valley Island. He looked at the island from afar and saw that the spiritual vigor on the island was weak, and there was no mountain or river for him to borrow. He concluded that there was no formation on the island, and without any hesitation, he flew forward. When he arrived at the island, he took a look around and found that there were only a few small demons here, and he could not find the Su clan's remnant. He then randomly picked a small demon and cast a soul-stealing technique on it. After some investigation, he found out that Su Yihua had left for a day and was not on the island. He did not know when he would return. He calculated for a while and found out that the sea area of Frost Maple Island was not small. He did not know what Su Yihua was going to do, so he had nowhere to look for him. Fortunately, he had found the place where Su Yihua was staying. If nothing happened, he would definitely return, so he might as well wait for him here. With a flick of his sleeve, the dozens of small demons turned into ashes, and he sat down. However, a moment later, he suddenly felt a surge of spiritual vigor from the south. There were streaks of flying lights flying up, and he could tell that something big was happening. He thought for a while and decided to go check it out, so he turned into a streak of light and flew away. At almost the same time, a golden carriage with a dragon head was traveling to the east. The Lord of Frost Maple Island, Wang Rao, sat in the carriage with a gloomy expression. Just now, there was news that his youngest son had raped a female cultivator when he was playing on the sea. It was not a big deal, but this woman was a disciple of Chan Palace. Shao Xin, the palace lord of Chan Palace, was furious when he heard about it. He immediately took action and detained her, forcing him to take her back personally. There were hundreds of forces in Fengling Ocean, but Chan Palace, Frost Maple Island, and Five Foals Cliff were the biggest, and they often fought with each other. The sect master of Five Foals Cliff died a few months ago, and Wang Rao was preparing to take over a few of his spiritual islands. For this reason, he personally went to the Chan Palace's flower party to ease the tension between them. Who knew that such a thing would happen after a few days of his return? He was extremely angry and scolded his son for not accomplishing anything, and at the same time, he hated Chan Palace for not giving him face. He had been cultivating for more than 700 years, and he liked to take in beauties. He had countless children and grandchildren. Usually, if one of them died, he would not even remember the name. But this child was different. His mother happened to be from the Five Steeds Island, so he would be of great use this time. Moreover, as the head of a sect, if he couldn't even protect his own son, where would he put his face? Therefore, when he heard the news, he couldn't care about anything else, and immediately set off for Chan Palace. Halfway there, he suddenly heard a call from behind, "Slow down, sect master." Wang Rao turned around and saw a hunchback Taoist and said, "So it's Elder Kim, what are you doing here? Is there something in the sect?" "You can suppress it first, and I'll deal with it when I return." Elder Kim cupped his hands and said, "Please forgive me, sect master. I heard that sect master is going to Chan Palace, so I made the decision on my own, and summoned all the guests here." Wang Rao was stunned and said unhappily, "I'm going to apologize, and it's not a battle. Why do I have to do this? Is Elder Kim afraid that people don't know that I've embarrassed myself?" Elder Kim's face showed a serious expression and said, "Sect master, even though I don't have the heart to cultivate, I don't lack beauties, so why would I do such a thing in front of Chan Palace? And it just so happens that I'm Palace Master Zhao's beloved disciple? This is a little strange. Sect master has to be on guard." Wang Rao heard this and became vigilant. Even though he didn't think that Chan Palace had a reason to deal with him at this time, but he felt that it was always better to be more careful, so he didn't insist, and called Elder Kim into the carriage, and they traveled together. Not far away, he saw a conveyance light coming from the side and stopping 1,000 feet away. Then the conveyance light opened, and Suihua walked out. He bowed and said, "Island Master Wang, this humble Taoist has come under orders." Elder Kim looked at him and said, "Jinren Huaxing, you came quickly, and among all the guests, you're the first to arrive." Suihua said, "I was picking herbs nearby, and when I heard Sect Master Wang's call, I didn't dare to delay, and rushed over immediately." Wang Rao looked at his respectful look, and was very satisfied and said, "Jinren Su, get in the carriage too, and travel with me." Suihua bowed and got into the carriage. Wang Rao looked around, including himself. There were 3 second-stage Yuanian cultivators here, and even if Chan Palace really had any ulterior motives, it was enough to deal with them, so he waved his hand and continued on his way. For hours later, the golden carriage finally arrived outside Chan Palace, and saw that in the sky full of snow, there was a palace that stood tall, and in the sky full of snow, there was a palace that was made of plain jade, and had ice tiles and crystal platforms. Outside the palace, there was a plum forest, and the pink petals were as red as blood. About 100 cultivators stood in front of the palace gate, and the one at the front was a woman wearing a crown, a buyao on her head, and a deep ceremonial robe. Her eyebrows and eyes were like a painting, and she had a jade-like nose and a jade-like mouth, and her cheeks were slightly plump, and she looked gentle and charming. Wang Rao recognized that it was Chan Palace Master Xiaoxin and wanted to go over to greet her, but Elder Kim came up to stop him and said in a low voice, "If you go any further, you'll be inside Chan Palace's forbidden array. Sect master can't go any further, let me go up and talk." Although Wang Rao felt that he was making a big fuss over a minor issue, he had no intention of refuting him and said, "So be it." Xiaoxin saw that after the golden carriage with a dragon had arrived, but did not move forward and couldn't help but frown, and turned back to look at Zhou Zishang who was hiding behind, and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhou, all the Yuanian cultivators of my Chan Palace are here. With my power, it's not difficult to kill these 3, but to capture them, I'll have to use some tricks." Zhou Zishang smiled and said in a low voice, "Don't worry, Palace Master Xiao, with Spiritual Master Huaxan as a spy, it won't be difficult to capture Wang Rao." At this moment, a female cultivator hurried over and reported, "Master, just now, there's a letter, and a few guest deities of Frost Maple Island are coming here." Xiaoxin's expression changed slightly and she said, "Could it be that Wang Rao sent something?" Zhou Zishang lowered his head in thought and said, "It can't be, otherwise, why would Wang Rao take the risk? Palace Master Xiao, you can go up and talk to him first and see if you can lure him into the array. If not, you have to act quickly, lest something unexpected happens." Chapter 961. After persuading Wang Zhao, Elder Kim descended from the sky and came before the cultivators of Cicada Palace. He bowed deeply and said, Jean Xiao of Frost Maple Island greets Cicada Palace Master. Xiao Shen didn't pay any attention to him. She didn't even look at him. She just stood there quietly. Elder Kim felt awkward and angry, but he couldn't flare up. He could only say again, Jean Xiao of Frost Maple Island is here under the orders of Sect Master Wang. Xiao Shen still turned a deaf ear. At this moment, whispers could be heard from the cultivators behind her. One person said, Sect Master Wang is also a respected elder of a sect. Even if his descendants are at fault, he shouldn't be afraid to come and see Palace Master, right? Someone else said, that's because he feels guilty and doesn't have the face to come, right? Someone else said, what do you mean he's in the wrong? I think he's just too timid. A few more steps and he will be in my Cicada Palace's restrictions. This Sect Master Wang is afraid that we will harm him. Once that was said, a few low sneers came from the crowd. When Elder Kim heard that, he said angrily, Palace Master Xiao, why don't you discipline your own disciples? How can you allow them to spout nonsense here? Xiao Shen turned around and replied in a cold voice, if I discipline my own disciples, then who will discipline the disciples of Frost Maple Island? Elder Kim cupped his fists and said, naturally, it will be my sect master who will discipline them. It's not up to outsiders to criticize. Xiao Shen said indifferently, where is your sect master? Why haven't I seen him? Elder Kim couldn't help but choke when he heard that. Wang Zhao's cultivation was profound. Even though he was sitting in the golden carriage, he heard the words clearly and felt embarrassed. He was a sect master after all. If he remained indifferent to being humiliated in front of others, how could he lead the sect in the future? He snorted. He had to ignore everything and go forward. Suihua went forward to stop him and said, Sect Master, don't be rash. These people are provoking you with words. It's clearly a trick. Wang Rao pointed in the direction of Chan Palace and said coldly, then what are you going to do? Are you going to let these people humiliate me? However, Suihua lowered his voice and said, Sect Master, don't be anxious. I have a plan that can test Chan Palace's intentions. Wang Rao suppressed her anger and said, speak. Suihua said, Sect leader can pretend to leave later. If Chan Palace remains indifferent, then I will be thinking too much. If they chase after us, they will definitely harm Sect Master. Wang Rao gradually calmed down. He also felt that something was wrong. He nodded and turned the dragon head golden chariot around, pretending to leave. As soon as he moved, Xiao Shen's expression changed. Zhou Zishang also cursed in his heart. When he first saw Suihua come forward to stop him, he was already on guard. Now that Wang Rao was about to leave, he was even more cautious. He knew that something had happened, but seeing that the big fish was about to take the bait, how could he allow it to escape from his hands? He immediately transmitted his voice, Palace Master Xiao. Things have changed, act quickly. I will take care of Wang Rao. When he finished, he turned into a streak of light and charged towards where Wang Rao was. At such a time, Xiao Shen knew that the arrow was knocked on the bowstring and had to be released. She flipped her hand and a light shadow floated out of her sleeves like thousands of flying flowers. He waved his hand at Elder Jean, who was standing nearby. Once she made her move, the 7 nascent soul elders behind her also followed suit. Countless bolts of astral lightning shot toward him. In the beginning, Elder Jean had suspected that the people of Chan Palace had other plans and had come here alone. He was already on his guard. Seeing Xiao Shen move, the jade headband flew up and a circle of spiritual light hung down, preventing the flying flowers from getting close. However, with just this block, he was also pinned down on the spot and couldn't fly away. He lost his last chance to escape. With his strength alone, how could he withstand the combined attack of 7 people? In the blink of an eye, he was drowned by countless lightning bolts and was blasted into pieces. Even his soul couldn't escape. When Wang Rao saw this, he was shocked and furious. If not for Elder Kim going for him just now, he would have been the one dead. He scolded loudly, Bitch, how dare you kill my people, I will cut you into 1,000 pieces. Suihua saw that his words were not at all befitting of a sect leader, so he couldn't help but frown. However, he said, Sect leader, This enmity can be avenged another day. Right now, it's better to leave quickly. Wang Rao also knew that it wasn't the time to be entangled. He drove the carriage back the way he came. After Xiao Shen and the others killed Elder Jin, they hollered and rose into a streak of light, chasing up into the sky. The Chan Palace elders behind them also followed. However, Wang Rao's dragon-head golden boat was extremely fast. In a short while, the two of them had already escaped hundreds of miles away. The people chasing them were even slightly further apart. If this continued, they wouldn't be able to catch up no matter what. When Zhou Zishang saw this, he regretted in his heart. After he entered Yuanying, he had been thinking of ways to improve his cultivation but neglected his supernatural powers. If he had mastered the heavenly cycle square, he would be able to catch up to the two of them with just one supernatural power. Why would he need to chase so hard? Su Yihua had been paying attention to the surroundings. At this moment, his gaze turned and he pointed, "Sect leader, look." Wang Rao turned and saw 6 rays of light flying over. Not only were there 2 guests, there were also 4 elders. It was enough to turn back and fight the Chan Palace. His courage was instantly boosted. At this moment, Su Yihua revealed a sly smile. Although he had signed the contract with Zhou Zishang previously, he could see that there were many things that could be manipulated. He believed that if Zhou Zishang got the other talisman from Wang Rao, he would definitely turn against him and kill him. If he was facing Zhou Zishang alone, he was confident that he could handle him. However, if this person were to join forces with the Chan Palace, then he wouldn't have the slightest chance. Therefore, he wanted to use the cultivators of Frost Maple Island to fight against the Chan Palace. It would be best if both sides were heavily injured. Only then would it be convenient for him to act. When Xiao Shen saw that the reinforcements from Frost Maple Island had arrived, her heart sank. Originally, she had set up a trap to lure Wang Rao's family into it. However, if they were to chase after them now, it would become a head-on battle between the two sections. Even if they could win, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. Then how would they deal with the Five Fulls Island? At this moment, she was also wavering in her heart. Zhou Zishang also cursed inwardly. He knew that if he were to let Wang Rao meet up with the reinforcements now, then there would be no chance at all. He hardened his heart and thought to himself, if I let you guys escape, then I wouldn't be worthy of being a disciple of Yu Xiao. He took out a talisman and activated it with his transcendence energy. Light waves rose and wrapped around him. Like a flying star, he arrived in front of the golden chariot in just a few breaths' time. At the same time, he gave a shout. The high cloud above his head spun and a spiritual pearl seemed to fly up. Then, a ray of light flashed and fell in all directions. In a split second, it enveloped the surrounding 10 miles. When the light flashed, the 3 of them disappeared in the sky at the same time. Xiao Shen couldn't help but be startled. Just now, though she had thought of retreating, now that Wang Rao was nowhere to be seen, her thoughts were stirred up again. The people of Frost Maple Island were like a group of dragons without a leader. It was a good opportunity to get rid of them. She said loudly, "My fellow disciples, follow me to get rid of this person." The cultivators of Chan Palace shouted in unison and followed her to attack. When the people of Frost Maple Island saw that their sect master had disappeared right in front of them, they were also extremely shocked and furious. However, since their sect master hadn't been rescued yet, they couldn't retreat. They could only take out their transcendent artifacts and brace themselves to fight with the cultivators of Chan Palace. Su Yihong only felt his vision blur for a moment before a surging sea of clouds appeared in front of him. He immediately recognized the origin of this art and exclaimed, "Vast cloud of one breath heaven?" The clouds in the sky parted and Zhou Zishang walked out. He stood in the sky and said coldly, "Perfected Master Su, as expected, you have other intentions." Su Yihua smiled and said, "Likewise." Wang Rao sensed that the atmosphere wasn't right. He turned his golden chariot and retreated. However, the two of them didn't chase after him. To break this vast cloud of one breath heaven, they had to kill the person who cast the art or force him to retreat. Zhou Zishang said solemnly, "Since there are only the 2 of us here, why don't we kill Wang Rao first and then decide who the talisman decree belongs to?" Suiwa waved his horsetail whisk and said with a smile, "That's what I was thinking." Just as the cultivators of the two sects were fighting, Wei Zihong had also arrived 100 miles away. He saw that there were streaks of light and lightning in front of him, so he stopped and sensed for a moment. However, he sensed that there was something wrong in the sky, as if a piece of heaven and earth had been forcibly erased by someone. He opened a slit between his brows and a divine light shot out. After looking for a moment, he couldn't help but frown and said, "Vast cloud of one-breath heaven? There's a disciple of the Zhou clan here?" To cultivate vast cloud of one-breath heaven, one must first cultivate the heavenly universe realm Tongshu. Therefore, the person who cast the art, needless to say, must be from the Dingyang Zhou clan. Wei Zihong looked over but didn't see Su Yihua's figure. He thought to himself, "There's no remnant of the Su clan here. He's most likely trapped in the one-breath heaven." After thinking for a while, he decided to wait here and wait for the outcome to be decided before making his move. However, after watching the cultivators of the two sects fight for a while, he shook his head. Even though they were all Yuanian cultivators, their arcane power and divine arts were far inferior compared to the elders of the Qinsong school, even when compared to the peers of Shenmen. To deal with them, he didn't even need to use a talisman. However, after watching for a while, his expression was filled with astonishment as he thought, "Why does this Chan Palace's divine arts and Taoist arts look similar to Li Shan sect? Could the two be related?" At this moment, the outcome of the battle was about to be decided. Without a leader on Frost Maple Island, it was inevitable that the people's hearts would waver. Shaoshan saw an opportunity and a ray of light flashed by, causing the elder who was fighting against her to spit blood. When Bai Shang saw this, he lost his will to fight and escaped. The people of Chan Palace didn't have the intention to chase after him and let him go easily. The other visiting chamberlain saw this and didn't have the heart to stay. He struck out hundreds of bolts of lightning and forced his opponent to retreat. He turned and leaped 1,000 feet away. Then, he covered his sleeves and escaped with a gust of wind. After they left, there were only 4 elders of Frost Maple Island who were struggling to hold on. However, the number of people on Chan Palace's side was almost double of theirs, so it was only a matter of time before they were defeated. Even though the visiting chamberlain broke out of the encirclement, he panicked and ran towards where Wei Zihong was. Suddenly, he saw a cultivator standing in the sky and thought that it was someone from Chan Palace. He didn't think much and subconsciously struck out the talisman in his hand. Wei Zihong looked over coldly. His body didn't move, but a pill floated up from the high cloud. It was as bright as the golden sun and was surrounded by turbid black smoke. When it shone, a thunderous sound was heard. With a crack, the talisman was smashed into pieces. Then, he raised his sleeves and a ball of black smoke flew over and engulfed the person. He rolled a few times inside and the treasured light on the person's body was ground into pieces. After a few breaths, with a miserable cry, the person turned into nothingness. Chapter 962. The cultivation technique Wei Zihong used was called Profound Core Tide Illuminating Mist. This was one of the cultivation techniques of the Yaoyin clan passed down by Tai Heng Patriarch. 3W. This cultivation technique had both internal and external aspects. The external aspect was used for attack while the internal aspect was used for defense. It was known as one surge and one surge, like a tide beating the shore, one rise and one pull, like a dragon turning over, one rise and one soar, seeing the spirit in the core. Originally, this cultivation technique required a flood dragon to practice to achieve twice the result with half the effort. However, after Tai Heng Patriarch abandoned the devil and entered the mystic realm, he changed it slightly. From then on, human cultivators could also practice it. This cultivation technique contains several variations of divine power. The more profound one's cultivation technique was, the more powerful the divine power would be. Although it wasn't the best for cultivation, it was extremely powerful for fights of magical powers. The moment he made his move, even though it was only for a moment, the people of Chan Palace with deep mana also noticed it. Seeing that he had killed a cultivator who was similar to them with just a raise of his hand, they were instantly shocked. However, they still had enemies in front of them, so they didn't care about what happened outside and only intensified their attacks. A moment later, all 4 elders of Frost Maple Island died in their hands. Xiao Chan then turned her gaze and saw that Wei Zihong was still standing there. She frowned and said, "Do you recognize this person?" An elder Daorin said, "Since this person watched us kill the Frost Maple Island cultivators, even if he's not a friend, he's not an enemy either." A green-robed Daorin said, "Palace Master, in this old man's opinion, this person's method is somewhat similar to that of the devil cultivators." Devil cultivators? Xiao Chan was shocked. She hesitated for a moment and said, "Send someone to ask why he's here." The green-robed elder volunteered. "This old man has dealt with a few devil cultivators in the past. It's better for this old man to go." Xiao Chan nodded and said, "Then I'll have to trouble Elder Gu. Be careful." After the green-robed elder bowed, he walked toward where Wei Zihong was. Because he saw what happened just now, he was very cautious and didn't dare to go forward rashly. He bowed from afar and said, "May I ask where fellow Taoist came from?" Wei Zihong glanced at him and said indifferently, "I'm here to catch a traitor in my clan. It has nothing to do with you." The green-robed old man was very tactful and did not ask who it was. He clasped his hands together again. Then he retreated. When he returned, he repeated Wei Zihong's exact words to him. Xiao Shen was not an idiot. She guessed that Wei Zihong was most probably here for that Reverend Huaxin. She thought to herself, "If this man is also here for the Small Realms Edict, then he must be here for me." He couldn't let it go. When fellow Taoist Zhou came out, "Then we'll deal with him together." At this time, Suiwa and Zhou Zishang were flanked by Suiwa and Zhou Zishang on his left and right. They were surrounding Wang Rao's carriage. However, even though the two of them had joined forces to fight the enemy, they were still on guard against each other, and for the sake of preventing the enemy from spying on them, they hadn't utilized their full strength. Under such circumstances, although Wang Rao was forced into a difficult situation, he was still able to hold on. However, he couldn't go on like this. Sooner or later, he would run out of arcane energy. So, he said loudly, "You too, I have no enmity with you. Why are you forcing me? Tell me what you want. As long as I have it, I will give it to you." Suiwa didn't say a word. He wouldn't tell them about the talisman. If they knew the reason and refused to yield, and instead used the talisman as a threat, he would be forced into a passive position. Therefore, he would rather kill them first and then slowly search for the talisman. Zhou Zishang didn't reply immediately. His eyes flickered, and his attacks paused slightly. Obviously, he was calculating the gains and losses. Wang Rao felt the pressure on him lightened a lot after he said this. Obviously, this matter was negotiable. His spirits were lifted, and he was full of anticipation. Suiwa saw this and couldn't help but sneer. If Zhou Zishang could see it clearly, he wouldn't have said the truth. After a short moment, Zhou Zishang seemed to have finally made up his mind, and he said, "Sect Master Wang, forgive me for being rude, but if you're willing to surrender and swear that you'll definitely hand over the things we want, then I can guarantee your life." Wang Rao didn't believe Zhou Zishang's words. If he did that, he would really lose control of his life. However, he at least knew that Zhou Zishang was really after something, and not because of personal enmity. So, he said in a negotiating tone, "Fellow Taoist Zhou, I trust you, but I don't trust Hua Exin. I took him in with good intentions, but he coveted the thing I have. Without a doubt, he has the nature of a wolf. I am willing to sign a contract with fellow Taoist Zhou. As long as it's not my life, I will give it to you. But fellow Taoist Zhou must promise me one thing, and that is to kill this guy with me." Zhou Zishang sighed and said, "Sect Master Wang, I have signed a contract with this enlightened Master Hua Exen long ago. Don't try to drive a wedge between us. That thing can't be taken by me alone, so I hope you can help me." At this time, Suiwa also said, "Sect Master Wang said something very well. There is no enmity between us. If you really do as fellow Taoist Zhou said, I have no intention of taking your life." Wang Rao looked at the two of them and laughed. Then, he said with a ruthless expression, "Do you think I'm easy to bully? Don't try to trick me. It's just a fight to the death." Zhou Zishang shook his head and said, "If that's the case, then I'll have to take it myself." He waved his hand, and a golden light flew out from the high cloud. In an instant, it pierced through the clouds, and with a shrill whistle, it pierced down. Wang Rao didn't dare to take it head-on. He hurriedly took out a jade talisman and used it to block the attack. Su Yihua showed a mocking expression. Frost Maple Island's founding master Xiao Zhu was able to fight with Master Ling Ye, and his disciples had fought with Yu Xiao's disciples several times. Yet, this Wang Rao didn't even recognize this star god Golden Thorn. He really didn't deserve to be a sect master. There were 7 types of needles, and each had its own use. This one was called Green Pivot Golden Thorn, and it was used to break protective magic treasures. As expected, the golden thorn pecked the talisman, and with a crack, it shattered the talisman into pieces. Then, it turned around and attacked the dragon-head golden chariot. Wang Rao hurriedly used his transcendence energy to open the chariot's restrictions. But under Zhou Zishang's control, the golden thorn pierced dozens of times in an instant. Not long after, the light on the chariot dimmed, and it looked like it was about to shatter. Su Yihua saw an opportunity, so he secretly grabbed a handful of lightning beads and threw them down. Wang Rao was shocked, and he hurriedly escaped from the chariot. Just as he left, the golden chariot was blasted into pieces by the lightning. At this moment, the golden thorn pierced again, and he hurriedly took out a golden ring. It spun in the air, and even the golden thorn was shaken, as if it was about to be sucked away. At the same time, he threw out a frost ball the size of a goose egg. Once it was in the air, a cold wind blew, and it made people feel like they were falling into an icy abyss. Su Yihua and Zhou Zishang saw this, and they used their magic treasures to protect themselves. They retreated a few miles, and just now, they managed to avoid the cold light. When they looked up again, they saw that Wang Rao had already retreated to the other side. Zhou Zishang said, "Sect Master Wang, don't think you can escape from my divine art." Wang Rao smiled strangely and said, "Even so, I still want the two of you to die with me." He raised his finger and swiped at the top of his head, and his whole body slowly became old and shriveled, as if all his essence, qi, blood, and flesh were sucked away in an instant. At the same time, a scarlet bug with a scarlet head could be seen in the wound, and it was twisting gently, as if it was about to wake up. Vermilion candlebug? Su Yihua's expression changed drastically. This was clearly a method of feeding the bug with blood. This bug was so big, and although it wasn't a king bug, it wasn't far from it. It wasn't something the two of them could deal with, so he turned his head and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhou, quickly stop your divine art." Zhou Zishang turned around and gave him a strange smile. Su Yihua's heart jumped, and he suddenly felt dizzy. He immediately realized that he had fallen into the opponent's trick. He silently inspected his body, and there was an extra evil aura in his body. He didn't know when it had invaded his body, but his magic power couldn't circulate anymore. At this moment, Wang Rao's body also shook violently, and the bug on top of his head stopped moving. Zhou Zishang sighed and said, "Once Sect Master Wang's method is completed, and he attaches his primordial spirit to the bug's body, I'm afraid we can only avoid it. Unfortunately, since I've pulled you all into the vast cloud one breath, how could I not prepare a backup plan?" The item he used was called Chaotic Mind Incense, which was refined from a poisonous bug in the Southern Cliffs continent. It could turn evil aura into a cultivator's body and block their essence and chi meridians. This thing was afraid of the light of the sun and the moon and the wind of heaven and earth, but in this small world, it didn't have such concerns. Wang Rao's face was filled with resentment, and he used all his strength to point at him. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't. Then he fell forward and fell off the cloud. Seeing this, Su Yihua quickly took out a bottle of medicinal pills and swallowed them. He looked at Zhou Zishang and said, "Good plan." Zhou Zishang smiled and didn't stop him at all. To get rid of this aura, a cultivator only needed to find a place and use their method. However, Zhou Zishang wasn't going to give him such a chance, so he remained calm. After Suihua swallowed the medicinal pills, he shook his hand, and a big flag appeared. He then took a step back and hid in it. Zhou Zishang smiled disdainfully, and with a wave of his hand, the green pivot golden thorn flew over and poked a hole in the flag. However, just as he finished doing this, his smile froze. He saw that after the broken flag, hundreds of identical flags flew out and flew in all directions to the west. This treasure was called Morning Tremor Flag. If a cultivator was in danger, he could hide in it. To find him, the only way was to cut off the hundreds of flags one by one. If one was unlucky, it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to find the real owner even after destroying hundreds of flags. This was not a treasure, and when used in a fight, it could only delay the battle. However, in this situation, it had a miraculous effect. Zhou Zishang cast out strong thunder repeatedly and destroyed dozens of flags, but he still couldn't find the one that Suihua was hiding in. He knew he had made a mistake. If he wanted to get rid of all of them, he would need at least an hour, and by then he would have suppressed the evil aura in his body. Zhou Zishang's thoughts changed, and he smiled again. He stretched out his hand, and a white aura lifted Wang Rao's body up. He took off his sleeve and had an idea. He couldn't help but laugh. So it's here. Fellow Taoist Su, since you don't want to take it, I'll accept it. Chapter 963. Although Suihua was hiding in the magical flag, he was still paying attention to the movements outside. When he heard Zhou Zishang's words, there was a moment when he couldn't help but want to rush out. However, the evil aura on him hadn't been removed yet, so he could only endure it. After the time it took to finish a cup of tea, he finally suppressed the evil qi and hurriedly swallowed a few medicinal pills to ward off evil and expel poison. Only then did he put away the sky-soar treasured flag and walked out. He cupped his fist and said, "Fellow Taoist really obtained the decree? Then I have to congratulate you." Zhou Zishang laughed and said, "Now that the 2 talisman decrees are complete, why don't we open the small world now? What does Taoist friend think?" Since Suihua was the only one who knew where the long residence was, forcing him wouldn't work. Therefore, his original plan was to use external poison to control this person and Wang Rao first. This way, he could force them to reveal the location of the long residence, and he could keep the 2 talisman decrees to himself. Since his plan had failed, instead of continuing to be entangled like this, he might as well open the small world first and talk about the rest later. Suihua's mind raced. After what happened just now, he was a little more wary of Zhou Zishang. If he really got the talisman decree from Wang Rao, it wouldn't be unacceptable. At most, they could play their tricks in the small world. Therefore, he said, "Taoist friend is right. When we signed the contract, we agreed to share the small world. Of course, we should do as we said." Zhou Zishang smiled, raised his hand and waved it lightly. In an instant, he dispelled the divine art. When Suihua saw that a thin layer of mist seemed to have been wiped away and sunlight shone on him, he knew that he had gotten out of solitary breath heaven. He swept his gaze around and saw that there were only cultivators of Cicada Palace in the surroundings. He didn't see anyone from Frost Maple Island. He knew that they had either escaped or been completely killed by the other party. He couldn't help but curse at his incompetence. When Xiaoshen saw Zhou Zishang coming out, she stepped on a cloud and went up to him. She looked at him and asked, "Taoist friend Zhou, how is it?" Zhou Zishang said in a deep voice, "Don't worry, Taoist friend. Wang Rao is dead and I got the item." Xiaoshen was delighted. She said, "Then how about coming down?" Zhou Zishang stopped her from speaking and glanced at the elders of Chan Palace intentionally or unintentionally, saying, "Fellow Taoist, don't be anxious. That place, the less people go, the better. The more people there are, the more eyes there are, it's inconvenient." Xiaoshen understood what he meant and nodded lightly. "Fellow Taoists' words make sense. Please wait for a moment. Once I've settled the matters in the palace, I'll follow the 2 of you." After taking a few steps, she glanced into the distance but didn't see Wei Zihong's figure. Her beautiful eyes turned and she said, "There's something I forgot to tell you, fellow Taoist. Just now, when the two of you were fighting Wang Rao, a cultivator from overseas came. They say they are here to capture a traitor. Do you know him? Traitor? Zhou Zishang was startled and thought to himself, could it be the Su family? Could it be that the people from Qinsong school have arrived? He did not dare to let his guard down. He asked in a deep voice, where is he? Xiaoshen raised her sleeve and pointed to a direction. Just now he's there, but now there's no trace of him. Maybe he didn't find the person he's looking for, so he left. Zhou Zishang did not let his guard down. He took a glance and asked again, how's his cultivation? Xiaoshen said, similar to us, just that his methods are treacherous, like those of the devil sect. Zhou Zishang was stunned. He frowned, devil sect cultivator? He thought about it again. No matter what this person's identity was. Now that he's gone, he wasn't hiding in the dark. Then he really left. Luckily there were many people on his side. As long as it wasn't a third-stage cultivator, there was nothing to be afraid of. At this moment in the sky above them, Wei Zihong was hidden in a ball of cloud, but his gaze was always on Su Yihua. This traitor is indeed here. It's not difficult to kill him, but to find out the whereabouts of the Long residents, we have to capture him alive. Those Chan Palace cultivators were nothing in his eyes, but with Zhou Zishang here, he had no choice but to be cautious. So he didn't make a move, but waited for the right time. After Xiaoshen and Zhou Zishang finished talking, she turned to the few elders in the palace. She said with a solemn expression, elders, I'll be going to that small realm with Zhou Zishang later. We'll leave a mark on the way, so you can pretend to leave and catch up later. One of the elders was tempted. Palace Lord means to snatch that place? Xiaoshen shook her head. I don't have such intentions, but it's hard to predict a person's heart, so it's better to be on guard. That elder echoed, what Palace Lord says is right. After a few more words of discussion, the elders bowed to her and flew into the sky. Zhou Zishang waited until this group of people had disappeared before he raised his head and said, fellow cultivator Su, please lead the way. Su Yihua bowed and turned into a ray of light, flying first. Zhou Zishang and Xiaoshen also flew into a ray of light and chased after him. They were only slightly behind him. When Wei Zihong saw this group of people flying in the same direction, he pondered for a moment and also followed them. After flying for half a day, the three of them arrived at the Stone Forest Island. Su Yihua found the entrance to the underground palace and landed. He pointed down and said, the realm gate is there. Fellow Taoists, please follow me. After that he walked down first. Zhou Zishang and Xiaoshen exchanged glances and also entered the inner room. Su Yihua did not play any tricks and led the two of them on the right path. Not long after, they arrived in front of the two spell altars. He slowly walked up to the spell altar on the left and said, fellow cultivator Zhou, please go to the spell altar on the opposite side. We'll work together and activate the talisman to open the realm gate. Zhou Zishang sensed for a moment and was relieved when he saw that there were no other restrictions around. He floated up to the spell altar on the right and took out a talisman with a flip of his hand. Su Yihua took a look and thought, as expected, it's in his hands. He did not look at it anymore and used his mana. Not long after, the stone mirror in front of the two of them started to ripple like water. Zhou Zishang did not dare to delay and used 2 fingers to clamp the talisman. He used his mana and in an instant, as if the surface of the water was hit by a large rock, the stone mirror exploded with a bright light. The two of them felt a surge of spiritual vigor surging into their bodies and they could not help but be happy. But at the next moment, their expressions changed at the same time. The talisman in their hands was actually suspended above the spell altar. No matter how hard they tried, they could not take it back. The realm gate was wide open and spiritual vigor leaked out. It would definitely attract cultivators from the outside world to come and take a look. Then, the secret of this place would be exposed. Zhou Zishang asked in a deep voice, fellow cultivator Su, do you know why this is happening? Su Yihua thought for a while and stroked his beard. I think that there must be a trick to keeping this talisman. It's just that we are not under that perfected person's sect. Naturally, we don't know the method. Xiaoshen then said, both of you, the realm gate is already open. Why don't we go inside and take a look? Maybe we can find the method to close the gate? Suiwa said, that makes sense. He turned around and said, fellow cultivator Zhou, I'll make a move first. Then, a light flew up from the spell altar and flew into the small world. Zhou Zishang laughed coldly and did not bother to greet Xiaoxin. He flung his sleeve and also flew into the small world. Xiaoxin snorted, but she was not in a hurry to enter. Instead, she sat cross-legged outside. She wanted to wait for her sect's disciples to arrive before going in. After a while, she saw a tall and handsome cultivator in a black robe with a vertical mark on his forehead walk in. She recognized the person she saw on the sea and her body trembled. She hurriedly stood up and took a few steps back. Her expression was filled with nervousness. Wei Zihong did not even look at her. His gaze was only on the realm gate of the stone mirror. Then he took a step forward. His body flashed like lightning and disappeared into the stone mirror. Xiaoxin saw that and heaved a sigh of relief. She heaved a sigh of relief. Just now, Wei Zihong was within 300 feet of her and she did not notice at all. It could be seen that it was not hard for him to take her life. Now, she did not dare to easily enter the small world. Wei Zihong entered and looked up. He saw many mountain ranges, strange cliffs and mountains everywhere. There were deep valleys and springs. He flew down and was just 10 miles away. A ball of white energy spat out and mixed with rain and mist. The dense mist made the mountains and heaven and earth hazy. The god eye in the middle of his forehead opened a crack and light shone out. After looking for a moment, he knew that everything in front of him was not an illusion. He was shocked and thought to himself, so it really is a small world. Then he showed an excited expression. Good, after I take it down, I will offer it to my master. He will definitely be happy. Those who could open up a small world were mostly powerful figures. He immediately realized that the reason Su and Zhou came to this place might be because there was something good hidden in this world. However, at this moment, the two of them were nowhere to be seen. He took out a stick of incense, covered it with his hand, and shook it gently. The smoke split into two, each heading in a different direction. He pondered for a moment, then flew up and chased after one of the smoke. At this moment, there were 7 rays of light that entered the inner palace. When they arrived in front of Xiaoxin, they all bowed and said, "Greetings, Palace Master." Xiaoxin said, "Everyone please rise." The green-robed elder looked at the stone mirror and said excitedly, "Palace Master, is this the realm gate? If we can get this place, our Chan Palace will prosper." Xiaoxin frowned and said, "It is not that easy. Zhou Zishang, Huaxin Zhenren and the cultivator from the outer endless sea that we met half a day ago are all inside. I need the 3 of them to follow me. Elder Wen, you stay here. Set up a formation with the rest of the people to guard the gate. Don't let anyone in." The green-robed elder immediately agreed, "Palace Master, don't worry and enter. The Chariot Island sect master is dead and the sect has no time to care about external affairs. Just now, Frost Maple Island has been defeated by me. On this Fengling Ocean, only our Chan Palace is powerful." Xiaoxin nodded and selected 3 elders to come out. They entered the small world together. However, the people here did not know that at the same time the realm gate opened, the fierce wind that was howling endlessly on the sea suddenly stopped. Then, it turned from strong to weak, and the wind gradually weakened. This change was immediately sensed by Chu Shang, who was waiting in the outer endless sea. When he arrived at the seaside, he looked around and found that the current wind was only a bit stronger than the whirlpool he came from. If he was a bit more careful and used magical treasures to protect himself, he might be able to break through. However, he was not sure how long this change of wind would last. If the wind returned to the previous state halfway, it would be bad. But he had already wasted a lot of time. Now that he had this opportunity, how could he miss it? After thinking for a long time, he decided to take a risk. He shook his body and turned into an ink carp that was more than 600 feet long. He knocked away the strong wind and rushed into the depths of the sea. Chapter 964. In the Wind Hill Inner Sea, A black-scaled carp crashed into the water wall and leaped out of the sea. After flying several hundred feet high, it turned in the air and transformed into a human. Chu Shang stood in the air and looked around. Before he came, he had already found out about the forces in the sea realm. The places where Suihua sought refuge were none other than the Five Horses, the Cicada Palace, and the Frost Maple Palace. This place was the closest to the Cicada Palace, so he planned to start exploring from there. After flying for a few miles, he stopped and turned his head violently, looking towards a direction. Between the sea and sky, there were streaks of spiritual light spreading and swaying like auspicious clouds. He was shocked and exclaimed, "Paradise?" But when he looked again, he shook his head. He had once cultivated in one of the three pools, the Surging Waves Lake. Although there were some similarities in his senses, the spiritual vigor here was clearer and more abundant, as if there was a bottomless ocean flowing underneath. In comparison, it was a notch better than the former. Especially at this moment, the spiritual opportunity on the sea was gathering towards that place continuously, spreading for tens of thousands of miles. Even the carp tribe's elder Chu you might not be able to do such a thing. It was more like the rumored small world. He pondered, the descendant of the Su family just came here and such a strange phenomenon appeared. Could it be related to the Long Manor? With that thought, he didn't dare to be careless. He immediately turned into a traveling light and sped towards the place where the spiritual opportunity was shining. After an hour, he was only 4 to 5 miles away from the place where the spiritual light was shining. But when he wanted to move forward, he was blocked by a cloud of mist and had no choice but to stop. After a brief examination, he recognized that someone had set up an array flag. But this couldn't stop him. With a wave of his hand, streaks of astral lightning fell down. This array was originally set up in a hurry. After getting hit by the explosion, it instantly shook and looked like it was about to break. The few Chan Palace elders who were guarding inside were alarmed and ran out to take a look. Seeing that there was no astral cloud above the person's head, it was obviously the Yuanying Dharma body. They couldn't help but exclaim, "A third-stage cultivator? Where did this person come from?" The green-robed elder was still considered calm. He said, "Don't bother about this. This person is up to no good. The three of you, follow me to guard the formation." The other 3 elders hurriedly sat down and used their magic power to protect the formation flags. At this moment, the spiritual vigor on the sea had gathered here. With the help of the 4 people's dermic powers, the array flag was able to gather. He managed to hold on. Chu Shang instantly became slightly impatient. He touched his abdomen with his hand. He took a deep breath, opened his mouth, and spat out a mouthful of honesty elixir water that he had stored in his body. Whoosh! Like a torrential downpour, countless water droplets overflowing with silver light fell down. This water droplet was incomparably heavy, and every droplet of water had the power to collapse rocks. With this sprinkling down, the formation flags could no longer withstand it and were immediately scattered. Chu Shang bent down and rushed to the entrance of the cave. With a grab of his hand, he instantly sealed the heaven and earth. The 4 elders of Chan Palace below were instantly unable to move. He stretched out his hand and took out a picture. He showed it to the 4 of them and said, "Do you know this person?" An elder looked at the man in the painting and blurted out, "Is that Reverend Hua Exin?" Chu Shang turned his head and asked, "Hua Exin?" "That's right. This is the name he uses when he travels outside." "Where is this person now?" The elder hesitated. Suihua was now in the small world. If it was another time, he naturally wouldn't have to cover for him. However, the palace master of Chan Palace was now inside. If he said it, this person would also enter to search, and it would be disadvantageous to his sect master. However, being stared at by Chu Shang, his heart shuddered. He didn't dare to lie, so he raised his hand and pointed at the door of the small world. Chu Shang kept the picture, and a cold gleam appeared in his eyes. Suddenly, a black light flew out from his back. The 4 of them immediately knew that it was bad, and they desperately summoned their protective treasures. However, when the black light collided with them, their treasures were all broken, and they were sent flying backward. Chu Shang snorted. If it wasn't for the fact that he had used up too much mana to cross the severe wind barrier just now, the four of them wouldn't have survived this attack. However, he had no intention to tangle with them now. He flung his robe, turned into a light, and darted into the small world. The elder in green saw him enter, but he couldn't resist at all. He couldn't help but feel embarrassed and angry. He said fiercely, "The three of you stay here and guard. I'll go back and get the formation map of Chan Palace. I don't believe that he can break out after breaking in." An elder said in shock, "Elderwin, think twice. If we get the formation map, what will be used to guard the Chan Palace?" The elder in green, Dauren, said, "As long as we have this small world, it's worth it even if we lose the Chan Palace. I've made up my mind. Everyone, don't try to persuade me. Guard this place well, I'll be back soon." As he said, he turned into a green light and disappeared into the vast sea. The remaining three elders were also helpless. They could only change another set of formation flags. In the depths of the small world, Wei Zihong followed the guiding smoke for more than 100 miles before he saw it fall straight into a deep ravine. He looked out and saw balls of light floating there. Layers of light gradually surged and he couldn't tell what was real and what was fake below. He made a hand sign and used his mana to summon a strong wind to blow away the light and reveal the true appearance below. It was a deep pool that spat out cold air from time to time. It was surrounded by frost crystals and ice flowers with branches and leaves hanging on them. They were as thick as a woven carpet. When the light shone on them and mixed with the mist, there was a 7-colored light. He sensed it and found it strange. There was actually a vigorous life force in the cold air. He took a light breath and felt his mind clear. He immediately concluded that there must be some kind of spirit essence, spirit treasure of plants growing below. The person before him must have gone down to check it out. He thought and casually threw out a dozen formation flags and placed them around. He hid himself and waited at the side, waiting for the person to come out. If the person inside was Su Ihua, he would definitely capture him. If not, there was no need to have a conflict with him. Not long after, the life force suddenly became intermittent. He guessed that it was taken by the other party. After a dozen breaths, the life force gradually moved towards the surface of the pool. He knew that the other party was about to come up. He couldn't help but stare at the surface of the pool. However, when the life force reached the edge of the pool, it seemed to notice something was wrong. It just hovered below and didn't come out for a long time. Wei Zihong suddenly felt that something was wrong. If the cultivator below really felt that something was wrong above, he should have concealed his own chi and this life force. Why would he expose himself in front of him? There was only one possibility: it was a bait. If there was another way out of the water, the other party might have already left. Apart from that, there was another possibility. As this thought flashed through his mind, he raised his hand and countless rays of light flickered. Numerous golden pages with talismans hovering around them flew up and covered the surroundings. Almost at the same time that he made his move, a golden light shot out from the side and pierced right into the golden pages. Poochie! The golden spike was incomparably sharp, and it instantly pierced through the golden page. After that, it didn't lose momentum and it landed on the protective treasure light. It only protected him for a moment before it similarly collapsed. However, with this delay, his figure flashed and he suddenly escaped 1,000 feet away. At the same time, he looked at the person who attacked him. He discovered that it wasn't Su Ihua but the Zhou disciple. However, since he had already made his move, he had no intention of retreating. Just as he was about to counterattack, he suddenly felt a sense of danger. The divine eye in between his eyebrows swept upwards and saw a tiny needle light appearing above his head. It was less than an inch long and was completely transparent. It was hard to distinguish its shape. He immediately recognized that it was one of the 7 golden needles of Yuxiao school, the mysterious golden needle. When it flashed, it was invisible and appeared and disappeared. It was very difficult to guard against it. He didn't dare to be careless. The heavenly cloud above his head shook and a black gas rushed up. With a series of crackling sounds, it swept away the needle. The moment the golden thorn was blocked, It disappeared in a flash. However, as soon as the treasure disappeared, the green pivot golden needle that broke his golden page took the opportunity to get close. It didn't give him a chance to catch his breath. Wei Zihong's mind raced, and he had already determined his opponent's goal. Once he got the upper hand, he would press on with an endless stream of attacks. As long as he couldn't withstand it or didn't know how to react, his life would be in danger. However, on the other hand, if the opponent wanted to maintain the attack, he would definitely use up a lot of mana. As long as he could defend well, once the opponent's momentum weakened, it would be his chance to win. He thought to himself, I have the minor universe movement escape technique. If I don't care about using up my mana, I should be able to retreat far away. Looking at this person's attack, although it is fast, he hasn't used his full strength. Maybe he's waiting for me to make a move. I can't be fooled, but I won't change my move. Let's see what he does. After he had an idea, the Xian core in the heavenly cloud flashed. He only slowly accumulated his mana and was not in a hurry to release it. At the same time, he raised his hand and actually took out hundreds of magical swords. Zhou Zishang saw that the sky was full of sword gleams. At first, he thought that it was similar to the primordial Yang's sword gleams. However, when he looked again, he was surprised. The opponent was really hundreds of magical swords. Even though these were ordinary magical weapons, they were hundreds of magical weapons after all. He didn't dare to ignore them. At this moment, if he had to fight with these magical swords, then the advantage he had before would be wasted. Therefore, he didn't dodge. With a deep shout, 7 spots of light appeared in the heavenly cloud. They suddenly turned into star thunder and met the sword head-on. A burst of thunder exploded in the sky. Wherever the lightning passed, more than 100 magic swords were swept away. Then, he rode the astral wind and attacked from the front. He made a hand seal, and the golden thorn in his hand turned into a swift light. From the beginning to the end, he didn't think of asking the opponent's identity. If he killed 1 or 2 people in this small world, no one outside would know. Moreover, he had long regarded this place as his. He had already made up his mind that after he finished with this person, he would go back and kill everyone who knew. Wei Zihong sneered, and with a wave of his hand, another sword appeared in his hand. He tossed it up into the sky, and it clashed with the green pivot golden thorn a few times in the air. In the end, it was no match for the green pivot golden thorn, and with a kacha sound, it snapped. His expression didn't change. He took out another 2 magical swords and continued to fight with it. After the 2 magical swords were also cut down, he calmly summoned a golden bell in the air. The Qing Shu golden thorn was the best at breaking and attacking magical weapons, so this magical weapon was only able to block a few attacks before it was pierced and broken again. After that, no matter how Zhou Zishang launched an attack, Wei Zihong didn't make any unnecessary changes. He only threw out a magical weapon to block. Zhou Zishang saw that he couldn't take down his opponent. He couldn't help but feel depressed. He obviously had the upper hand, but the opponent had many magical weapons and continuously dissolved his attacks. What kind of cultivator was this? After Wei Zihong held on for a long time, he felt that his magical power had been channeled to the peak. He shouted. In the heavenly cloud above him, a Xian Dan was as bright as the sun. It suddenly turned and a ray of light that could pierce through the sky and the earth shone down. Chapter 965. The ray of light was extremely fast and the 2 were very close. Zhou Zishang only saw a flash and before he could react, he was hit. Even with the protection of his treasured robe, Wei Zihong's attack had been stored up for a long time. Now that it was released, its power was far greater than usual. Zhou Zishang's body shook heavily. Not only did his treasured robe split open, but even his protective treasured light was destroyed. He was sent flying by the lightning. He could only hear the sound of explosions and his mind was in a daze. Wei Zihong regained the upper hand and was greatly energized. It was a good opportunity for him. He took out a delicate jade mallet and chased after his opponent. At the same time, layers of black smoke surged behind him as if trying to drown him. Zhou Zishang was hit just now and his energy was in a mess. He could not circulate his mana in a hurry. Because his treasured robe was gone, he had no protection. Even if it was a normal talisman, he did not dare to take it head-on. He raised his thumb to the sky and the ring on his hand emitted a strange energy. It was white with a hint of gray, like a ball of cotton. The jade mallet sunk in but did not come out for a long time. Wei Zihong did not expect the talisman to succeed. He only wanted to delay. Once his technique was completed, the opponent would not be able to escape. Seeing that the talisman was taken, he waved his sleeve and threw out a dozen lightning beads the size of pigeon eggs. They were all purplish-black and emitted a murderous aura. Zhou Zishang's breath had not calmed down yet, so he raised his finger to the sky and took the lightning beads just now. Wei Zihong's lightning beads came easily. They were presented to him by the small sects below. He still had hundreds of them on him, so he did not even blink and threw them out. Zhou Zishang's expression changed slightly. He used the same trick and released the cloud from the ring. He took on this round of attacks, but his heart was filled with impatience. This talisman was called the Rotten Swallowing Ring. Within an hour, it could absorb powerful talismans and items into it. It could be said to be very strange. However, it needed to be slowly dissolved with mana. If not, the power inside would leak out. At that time, not only would the talisman be destroyed, but the owner of the talisman would also be affected. Even the owner of the talisman, who was connected to it, would be harmed. If it was serious, his life would be in danger. Thus, he was not in the mood to get entangled here. He was only thinking about how to retreat. His gaze swept to the left and right, but he was shocked. Countless black smoke and fiendish fog gathered in the surroundings. Looking at it, it covered a radius of several li. How could he not know that this was a trap set up by the other party? However, he also understood that if he didn't fight with his life on the line, he wouldn't be able to leave even if he wanted to. However, the attacks from above were endless. If he didn't want to slowly look for an opportunity, he would have to pay a price. He made up his mind and gathered a bit of magic power with great difficulty, activating the protective treasure light around his body. At the same time, he took out a feather fan and gently waved it. A strong wind suddenly rose, and the mountains and rivers moved. The black smoke was stirred up by the wind, and like a drop of ink falling into water, it turned into wisps and dispersed. At the same time, the attacks from above landed, and with a kacha sound, the protective treasure light was scattered. It shook his internal organs to the point that they felt like they were splitting apart. Blood rushed up his back, and he forcefully swallowed a mouthful of salty blood. His sleeves shook, and strong winds rose up from his 2 armpits. It was like he was spreading his wings and he escaped from the gap. Just now, Wei Zihong was continuously attacked by Zhou Zishang, and he was holding in his breath. How could he let him escape so easily? The god eye on his forehead opened, and his gaze focused on Zhou Zi's back. The latter felt his body freeze up. He was clearly conscious, but his body couldn't move. He knew that things weren't good, and he didn't care about holding back anymore. A star bead flashed on the cloud above him, and it suddenly broke apart, turning into specks of starlight. It was like broken jade glass, and it covered his entire body. Wei Zihong reached out and grabbed. The black smoke and fiendish energy that filled the air gathered and wrapped him up. However, no matter how much strength he used, he was unable to break through that layer of light. He pondered for a moment and said, "From the looks of it, it seems like the Yuxiao school's star-steadying art." This art was one of the 16 arts of the Yuxiao school. Once the supernatural power was used, it was like the star-steadying art. As long as one's own vitality wasn't exhausted, it would be difficult for external forces to invade. Wei Zihong snorted coldly. He heard that the cost of using this art wasn't small, and the person who used it also had to bind their own hands and feet, making it difficult for them to move. Usually, it was only used to save lives, and they could only wait passively for others to save them. At the worst, he would just wait here and see how long the other party could last. At this time, on the other side of the small world, Su Iwa stopped in front of a tall mountain. This place was extremely strange. There were round stone eggs all over the slope, and strange trees grew on the mountain walls, growing out diagonally from between the rocks. From afar, They looked like countless burrs. However, in this strange place, there was a stone platform halfway up the mountain, and he could vaguely see a dilapidated temple on top. He looked for a moment, and did not sense anything strange, so he floated over to the temple. When he arrived in front of the temple, he saw that the stone tiles were broken on the ground, and the original wooden beams had long rotted and collapsed on the ground. However, this temple had a back hall, which was built on the rock wall, so most of it was still preserved. Along the way, he didn't see a trace of anyone. This temple was built using mortal methods, so it was obvious that there used to be living people living in this small world, but for some reason, there was no trace of them now. As he was afraid that the temple wouldn't be able to withstand too much of a commotion, he didn't fly, and only walked inside. After about 30 steps, he saw a cave that was 100 feet high. Inside, there was a 3-tiered altar, and on top of it was a statue of a deity. This statue didn't have a mouth or nose, only a pair of long and thin eyes, and 2 ears that were open to the back, like the ears of a deer. It was extremely strange. Under the statue of the deity was a spirit tablet, but it was made of jade, and it was covered with a thick layer of dust. Suihua stretched out his hand and grabbed, and the spirit tablet flew up. As soon as it left the table immediately collapsed, and a cloud of dust rose up. It was obvious that it had long rotted. He took a few steps back, and lowered his head to look at the spirit tablet. He wiped away the dust, and the words on it were already blurred, and he could only vaguely make out the 4 words, Shenmu Celestial Master. He thought for a while, and in his memory he had never heard of such a name. At this moment he felt his sleeve tremble, and there was an extra young man in yellow in the hall. When Suiwa saw this person, he hurriedly bowed and said respectfully, Jinren Qinyang. The young man in yellow nodded at him, and took the spirit tablet. He looked at it, and then glanced at the deity statue and said, It really is Taoist Shenmu's spirit tablet. Suiwa asked, Jinren, do you recognize this person? The young man in yellow shook his head and said, I have never seen him, but this person's disciple had interacted with your Su ancestor before. He was originally a cultivator of the West Continent, and was one of the few who entered the South Cliffs continent to kill poisonous insects, and established a sect over 10,000 years ago. Suihua came to a sudden realization, and pointed at his feet, and said, Could it be that this small world was established by this person? The young man in yellow shook his head and said, Although this person's cultivation is not shallow, to want to open a small world, he still doesn't have that kind of ability. This small world should be passed down from the hands of the ancestors. He looked around and said, I remember that this line of cultivators has a few techniques that sacrifice poisonous insects to fight against enemies, and they are very powerful. This sect does not select the origin of their disciples, and they accept both humans and demons. The Yuxiao school used thousands of years of effort to exterminate them, and even so, they still have their orthodoxy passed down. You can look around, and maybe you will find some opportunities. Suihua bowed and said, Jinren, thank you for your guidance. At this moment, the young man in yellow's expression changed, and he looked towards a direction. Suihua said, Jinren, what's wrong? The young man in yellow said, Let me give you a reminder. Just now, there is a qi dynamic that entered this small world. Although he is cultivated in qi, he still can't hide the demonic aura on his body. If it's not the Python tribe, then it's the cultivator of the carp tribe who chased you here. This person's cultivation is not weak, and he should be in the middle of the 3rd Yuanying realm. You should be careful. After saying that, his shadow flashed, and he disappeared. Suihua's heart tightened, and he did not dare to stay here for long. He roughly searched inside and out, and because he did not find anything, he could only hurry out. When he reached outside the temple, he looked back, and he was a little unwilling. He thought to himself, I can clearly feel the spiritual vigor here from afar, but why can't I feel anything here? As he was thinking, he lightly raised his hand and patted the rock wall beside him, and this time, he felt something strange. He turned his head to take a look, and where his hand landed was a stone egg that was embedded here. It clearly looked uneven, but when his hand touched it, it was abnormally smooth. Looking closely, he could see some clues. There seemed to be a layer of shell on it, but it was crystal clear, so it was hard to notice. What is this? He pressed on it, and with a crack, the stone egg instantly shattered, revealing a black thin object. At a rough glance, it looked like a short rope, but with a closer look, he could tell that it was the carcass of an insect, and it looked similar to the vermilion candle insect. Suiwa was shocked. So this stone egg was just a layer of a hard cocoon, but after a long time, it looked like a stone. Looking at the stone eggs that were everywhere at the foot of the mountain, could it be that these are all insect cocoons? His thoughts turned quickly, and he thought to himself, could it be that this place is where Zhenren Shao raised insects? This was not impossible. Back then, this Zhenren Shao relied on a vermilion candle king insect to break into the grotto heaven, but this demon was abnormally fierce. How did he subdue it before? But if this world originally had a collection, or if there was a difficult technique to subdue insects, then it could be explained. Thinking to this point, his heart was also burning up. This small world was left by Zhenren Shao for his 2 disciples, and Qin Yang's true spirit once said that this sect passed down techniques everywhere. Maybe the technique of controlling insects was passed down here. If he could obtain it, then he would not have to fear any cultivators of the same generation. Even if it was a Yuanying 3rd-grade cultivator, he would be able to fight. But as soon as this thought came up, he regained his calmness. Now that there was a great enemy in front of him, it was still too early to talk about this matter. If he could not get through this, even if he had the Tong Tian technique, what could he do? He sneered and thought to himself, everyone has their own selfish motives. I do not believe that the person who came here is willing to share this small world with others. There will be a fight later. The plan now is not to find a technique, but to find a place to hide first. Just as he was thinking, he suddenly sensed something strange. He turned his head to look, and saw 4 rays of light flying towards here. Looking at their route, they seemed to be cultivators of Chan Palace. His heart was shocked. This was a lone mountain. If he wanted to fly out now, it was hard to guarantee that he would not be discovered by the other party. Looking around, there was no place to hide. He had no choice but to retreat back into the temple. Floating astronomy. Chapter 966. Suiwa was afraid that he would be discovered. When he retreated, not only did he hide his qi dynamic, he also erased the traces he left behind. As there was no one around, he could only cast an invisibility spell and hid behind the statue. As long as he himself did not move, or no one went around this place, he would not be discovered. Shao Shen led the 3 elders to fly in the air and soon arrived at the front of the mountain. She looked down and sensed that the spiritual vigor here was much stronger than other places. However, after taking a look, she said, "Elders, take a look. Is there anything unusual about the shape of the mountain?" To her left, an elder with the surname Yu was more than 800 years old. He was one of the few people in the Fengling Ocean and was knowledgeable. He said, "Palace Master, you are right. The mountain is where the qi of the earth surges. This mountain is made up of mud and sand, and the qi is suppressed below. It must have been built by the later generations. Although the spiritual vigor here is strong, I dare to say that if one enters the mountain, he will not be able to sense it." Shao Shen asked, "Elder Yu, do you know what is the purpose of building the mountain?" Elder Yu stroked his beard and said, "Looking at the shape, it does not look like an altar. I think there might be something hidden below. It might be a tomb chamber." "Tomb chamber?" Shao Shen's eyes brightened. The other elders looked at each other and they were all excited. Even if a normal cultivator was successful in his cultivation, after the primordial spirit left, the spiritual vigor would dissipate. Their bodies would rot after decades. As there were evil cultivators who used corpses to cultivate, they would not be left behind. They would not use their mana to remove it, and it was rare for them to be buried under rocks. Unless it was the remains of a mighty person, it would not rot for tens of thousands of years. And the person who was buried in the mountain as a tomb. This person's identity must be extraordinary. The few of them did not purposely lower their voices. Su Yihua, who was hiding in the temple, heard them clearly. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it made sense. However, he was annoyed. Why did he not see it just now? This opportunity was going to be taken by these people. Elder Yu looked at everyone's expression and smiled. Don't be too happy. If it was a human emperor, he might not be able to build such a huge mountain. He pointed to the middle of the mountain and said, there is a temple there. There was no harm in going there to take a look. Perhaps we can find out the origin of the owner of this place. If it's really a mortal palace tomb, we don't have to waste our efforts. Xiao Shen nodded and said, that makes sense. She led the 3 elders into the temple. Inside the cave, seeing the appearance of the deity statue, they were also astonished and whispered a few words to each other. They were certain that the person buried here was not an ordinary person. In that case, it was very likely that he would be able to find something good at the foot of the mountain. There were no formations or spiritual vigor here, so they were not in the mood to look around. Just as they were about to leave, Xiao Shen suddenly stopped in her tracks. She turned around and walked towards the statue. Su Yihua immediately tensed up. If he were to clash with the 4 of them, he wouldn't be afraid. Even if he couldn't defeat them, it wouldn't be difficult for him to escape. But he was afraid that the commotion here would attract others, especially that demon cultivator from the carp tribe or the python tribe. This person was a 3rd-stage realm cultivator, and no matter what, he would not be able to defeat him. Xiao Shen came to the front of the god statue and stopped after about 10 steps. She bowed and said, Senior, Junior will be opening my palace acupoint in a moment. I have offended you, please forgive me for being disrespectful. Saying that, she bowed deeply 3 times. After that, she led the 3 elders and left. Su Yihua then put down his worried heart. But at this moment he started to hesitate. Previously he didn't know that there was something strange below, but now that he knew, he wasn't willing to leave just like that. He thought to himself, it's not too late to leave after I see what the 3 of them have taken. 1,000 miles away from this mountain, Wei Zihong sat cross-legged in the air. His hands were constantly forming hand signs. The surrounding black smoke and baleful qi surged like a tide, enveloping a radius of a few miles and completely covering Zhou Zishang's figure. Other than that, he had also set up another array flag outside. He was confident that with this setup, the opponent would definitely not be able to escape. As long as the magical power dissipated, it would be the time to be beheaded. As for the opponent's identity as a disciple of Ding Yangzhou clan, he didn't care at all. Not to mention that the opponent had the intention to kill first, even if it wasn't. At this stage of the battle, there was no room for mercy. He had to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. After waiting for an hour, he suddenly stood up and looked towards a direction. His eyes were filled with vigilance. A ray of light came from the southeast direction. Although it looked clear, a Yuanian cultivator like him who came from the Shenmen sect could tell with a glance that this person was of a different race that had entered the Dao. That was why he had a bit of demonic qi. However, when the newcomer flew over, the strong winds of mana shook the sky. His cultivation was definitely not shallow. It was very likely that he had reached the 3rd stage. When the ray of light reached the top, it turned downwards. The light was like a curtain of water that swung to the sides. A tall and sturdy man with a round waist came out. He had a turban on his head, a dark python belt around his waist, and a dark cloak on the outside. He didn't look like a cultivator, but a valiant warrior that fought in a battle formation. Chu Shang walked down and glanced at the formation. Because it was covered by the baleful qi, he couldn't see who was trapped here. He suspected that it was Su Yihua and asked, "Who are you trapping here?" Wei Zihong glanced at him. He'd already guessed Chu Shang's identity. Then it was obvious that Chu Shang's objective for coming here was none other than the true dragon estate. Thus, Wei Zihong didn't have a good expression on his face and said bluntly, "What does that have to do with you?" Chu Shang was stunned. All along the way here, because of his high cultivation, no one dared to be disrespectful to him in the slightest. Never had he imagined that Chu Shang would actually not give him any face here. This caused him to not dare act rashly instead. He sized up Wei Zihong from top to bottom and said, "I'm looking for someone. If it's convenient for fellow Taoist, then you just have to move aside and let me see clearly. If it isn't this person, then I'll leave right away." Wei Zihong had set up this formation with great difficulty, so how could he withdraw his mana just because of a few words? It would be fine if he was just an ordinary cultivator, but he had the identity of the Yaoyin sect's master above him, so he naturally couldn't give in so easily. He said coldly, "This is definitely not the person you're looking for, so please leave quickly." When Chu Shang heard this, he was extremely displeased in his heart, and killing intent floated between his brows. However, he guessed that Wei Zihong had a background, so in order to avoid any more trouble, he endured it and asked calmly, "If you're not a cultivator from the Fengling Ocean, then which profound sect in the East Flower are you from? I'll be acquainted with your master." Wei Zihong smiled in disdain and waved his sleeve as he said mockingly, "Do you think you're worthy of being acquainted with my master?" Chu Shang instantly became furious and said, "Junior, you're courting death." He thought that Wei Zihong was hinting that he was of a different race. In reality, Wei Zihong was only hinting that his cultivation wasn't high enough. Not to mention that there were many demon cultivators in the clear nether heavenly lake. Even the Yaoyin sect's founding master had attained the Tao as a devil flood dragon, but she didn't have the slightest intention of looking down on the different races. However, he misunderstood and finally couldn't hold it in anymore. The rage from before burst forth, and he stretched out his hand to grab and instantly executed the heaven and earth lock technique. At the same time, a jet black light flew up from behind him. It came crashing down. Wei Zihong was taken advantage of. His body instantly froze, but he didn't panic at all. He forcefully circulated his mana, and his figure suddenly disappeared from where he was. He went straight to 1,000 feet away. That jet black light naturally missed as well. Chu Shang saw his escape technique. He said in shock, "Minor heavens shifting escape technique?" He hurriedly retracted his hand, and even his tone changed. "Are you a disciple of the Qinsong?" Wei Zihong grabbed a magic sword and held it in his hand. He raised his head slightly and said coldly, "Wei Zihong from the Zhaoyu sect of the Qinsong would like to seek guidance from fellow Taoist." He was about to attack when Chu Shang heard him announce his sect, and his expression changed greatly. He hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Wait." He took a breath and cupped his hands, saying, "So you're a disciple of the Qinsong Hall Master Duzhen. Just now it's my fault. I hope fellow Taoist won't blame me for offending you." If it was another Qinsong cultivator, he wouldn't be so afraid. However, over 10 years ago, when Zhang Yan passed by the East Sea, he once fought with the Carp tribe's elder Chu Yu on the sea. In the end, he suppressed Chu Yu, and that was still fresh in his memory. He heard that after this person returned, he killed that spiritual master Yen, which showed how strong his mana was. If he touched his disciple, it wasn't impossible for him to kill them in a fit of rage, so he didn't dare to be arrogant anymore. Wei Zihong also didn't have the confidence to defeat him. Seeing that he apologized, he also retracted his hand, but he didn't say a word on the surface. Chu Shang said, "I won't disturb spiritual Master Wei anymore. Farewell." He cupped his hands again and leaped up, flying away. Wei Zihong's gaze followed the escaping light further and further away. Seeing that he really left, he sat down again. A day later, there was finally movement in the fog, and a weak voice came from inside. "This fellow Taoist is a disciple of Xian Gate. I'm Yu Xiao's disciple. If you let me out today, I'll remember a favor from you." However, Wei Zihong remained indifferent. After a while, Zhou Zishang's voice spoke again. "If you kill me, aren't you afraid that I, Yu Xiao, will take revenge on you?" Wei Zihong said indifferently, "If you die here, who will know that I killed you?" Zhou Zishang snorted, "Ignorant person, how can you know my, Yu Xiao's secret technique?" Wei Zihong was still unmoved. Since he had decided to kill his opponent, he wouldn't let go no matter what he said. Zhou Zishang was also a person who cared about his reputation. Seeing that his threats were useless, he knew that he was going to die today, so he actually laughed. At first, his voice was loud and clear, but after a while, it became weaker and weaker, until finally, there was no sound. Wei Zihong frowned, and the divine eye on his forehead opened to take a look. Looking into the formation, he saw Zhou Zishang sitting cross-legged on the ground with a finger pointed at the center of his brows. his vitality was gone, and his spirit was gone. He had actually killed himself. Yuxiao School, Bu Yun Tower. Zhou Zhao was deducing a Taoist technique that he had obtained from another sect when a gust of wind blew outside the door. He was slightly displeased. This movement was obviously caused by someone escaping outside the palace and did not stop. He asked, "Who is so rash?" Just as he finished speaking, he saw a disciple rushing in. When he saw him, he said anxiously, "Master, something bad has happened." Zhou Zhao saw his flustered look and put down the jade scroll in his hand. He frowned and said, "What happened? Tell me slowly." The disciple said, "I'm just now guarding the North Arch Hall, but a piece of my life plate cracked for no reason." Zhou Zhao's heart skipped a beat. The life plates of the Zhou family's disciples were enshrined in the North Arch Hall, and all the cultivators who had reached the state of Yuanying were listed. If the life plate cracked, it meant that someone had died. This was not a small matter. Since the South Cliff continent was conquered, other than the sword battle of the 16 sects a few hundred years ago, there had never been a precedent of a Zhou family disciple dying outside. He asked in a deep voice, "Who is it?" The disciple said, "I dare not speak of my name, but I have a talisman that fell from the hall." As he said this, he held up a jade talisman with both hands. Zhou Zhao took it and saw that it was the main branch disciple, Zhou Zisheng. He sighed and said, "You can leave, I need to report this to eldest Shixiang." However, he knew in his heart that the Zhou family's direct disciple had mysteriously died outside, and the culprit was unknown. This was not a small matter, and it was very likely to alarm the Zenrins above. Floating astronomy. Chapter 967. Zhou Ruing was meditating in the Ministry of Defense's Exenming cave when a decree floated in with golden light. Her expression turned solemn, and she stood up to receive it carefully. She then bowed and said, "Disciple Zhou Ruing respectfully accepts the decree." When the golden light on the Dharma decree dissipated, she opened it. However, when she looked at it, a look of dissatisfaction appeared on her face. After pondering for a while, she said, "Someone, take my Dharma talisman and bring me the clan disciple Zhou Zishang's clan register." A disciple guarding the door bowed to her and said, "Please wait for a moment, Jinren." He then turned and flew out. Less than an hour later, the disciple returned with 3 jade scrolls in his hands and said respectfully, "The register that Jinren needs is here." Zhou Ruing took a look and saw the 3 jade scrolls flying towards her. She only flipped through 2 of them briefly and then threw them aside. She only picked up the last one, the Book of Conduct and Propriety, to read it carefully. This book was especially important. In the Zhou clan, any disciple with potential would have their words and actions recorded in this book after they entered the clan. The stricter teachers would write down clearly where the disciple went and how many days he came and went. Even which divine power he practiced and who gave him pointers had to be noted down. With this book in hand, to the elders and teachers, the level of the disciple's cultivation base and when he would be able to break through the barrier would be clear. It would be impossible to hide it even if they wanted to. Only by reaching the 3rd layer of the nascent soul realm would one be able to break free from this kind of situation. It would no longer restrict one. Zhou Ruing thought that it would be easy to find out the whereabouts of Zhou Zisheng. It was easy to find out Zhou Zisheng's whereabouts, but after looking at it, he found out that his whereabouts were quite detailed in the past, but in the past half a year, there was nothing. He frowned and asked the disciple, "What's going on? Why is there no record here?" How would the disciple know? He wasn't the one in charge of the register, but he had been in the clan for a long time and knew quite a bit of inside information. He said in a low voice, "I guess that Su Zhouzi is still a disciple of the main branch." Zhou Ruing snorted as he understood the reason. The words and actions of the clan disciples were recorded every month, but no matter how strict the rules were, there were still loopholes that could be exploited, especially for the main branch disciples. In order to do some secretive things, they would often just now make up for it after a year and a half. Naturally, these were all fake words. Zhou Zishang, on the other hand, did not give any explanation when he left because he was wary of people from the clan fighting over the Dragon Mansion. Zhou Ruiying also knew that there was no point in dwelling on this matter. He said with dissatisfaction, "Does no one know where he went?" The disciple lowered his head, not daring to answer. Annoyed, Zhou Ruiying waved his hand and chased the disciple away. She thought for a while and went to sit in front of the dressing table. She wiped her hand on the mirror and seemed to remove a thin layer of mist. After a while, a blurry figure appeared on the mirror and said with a smile, "Junior sister, what is it that you can't decide?" Zhou Ruiying sighed and said, "Zhou Zishang, a disciple of the clan, died mysteriously. I believe senior brother knows about it. This matter should have been handled by Zhou Yong, but I didn't expect Venerable Master to give me a decree just now." There was resentment in her tone because Zhou Yong was the one who was in charge of the clan's secular affairs. This matter should have been handled by him, but after he became a grotto heaven, he asked Venerable Master Lingya for a decree and pushed this task to her. Although Zhou Yong became a grotto heaven later than her, in terms of ranking in the clan, he was above her, so she could do nothing about it. The reflection in the mirror said seriously, "Since it's Venerable Master's decree, then it must be done well." Zhou Ruiying also said, "Little sister thinks so too, but Zhou Zishang's death is a bit strange. There is no trace of his whereabouts in the school records, so he didn't want outsiders to know where he went. Therefore, I want to ask Shixiang to come forward and ask the Great Giffen where he died. As for the Dan Jades that I need, I don't have enough of them recently, so I ask Shixiang to temporarily make up for it. When the tribute arrives next year, I will return it to Shixiang." The reflection in the mirror was surprised and said, "Junior sister is really willing." The Great Giffen was the treasure of the Yuxiao clan. A cultivator only needed to inscribe their name on it, and if they died, they would know where they died and where they reincarnated. It was just that every time the real spirit was summoned, a lot of Dan Jade had to be sacrificed. Zhou Ruiying said helplessly, "Venerable Master personally ordered that if I don't do it well, I'm afraid I will be punished. Since I don't have the heart for the Tao, there's no need to fuss over these Dan Jade." The reflection in the mirror smiled and said, "If that's the case, junior sister, please wait for a moment. I'll be back soon." As soon as he finished speaking, the figure suddenly disappeared. After a while, he reappeared and said, "The great Guifang said that the stars fell in the south and perished in the land of the wind." Zhou Ruiying pondered for a while and said, "South? The land of the wind? Could it have fallen in the Fengling Ocean? If we go there, it won't be hard to find out." She raised her hand and condensed a flying letter. With a wave of her hand, she sent it out. Once this letter reached the outside world, there would naturally be disciples who would help her find out the details. In less than 2 hours, several flying letters came back. She flipped through them. Although they came from different people, they all mentioned that there were cultivators who had seen Zhou Zishang's whereabouts on the Fengling Ocean. Zhou Ruiying's expression turned cold and he said, "Looks like it really is a cultivator from the Fengling Ocean. He actually dared to kill my Zhou family's disciple. This person is really daring." The figure in the mirror pondered for a while, but he said, "I think that it might not be a cultivator from the Fengling Ocean who did it." Zhou Ruiying said, "Senior Marshal Brother, are you saying that it's someone else?" The figure in the mirror slowed down his voice and said, "It's just my humble opinion. It's only been a few years since the Devil's Cave came into being. Last time, Qinsong School suppressed and destroyed 2 of them. This time, if I, Yu Xiao, fail, I will definitely be looked down upon by the fellow Taoists of the Shenmen in the world. We can't make even the slightest mistake. If the South is unstable at this time, it'll be like a fire in the backyard. It'll be hard to take care of both the front and the back. If I set up a trap, maybe I'll land a piece here. Junior Marshal sister, you can't be careless." When Zhou Ruiying heard this, he also calmed down. He thought carefully and said, "What Senior Marshal Brother said makes sense. Junior Marshal sister is lacking in thought. With the current cultivators in the Fengling Ocean, there's almost no one who can take Zhou Zishang's life. Ever since Reverend Xiao Zhu was defeated in the battle with Master Lingya, all the cultivators under him had retreated back to the Fengling Ocean. If Yuxiao School really wanted to wipe them out, a mere severe wind barrier wouldn't be able to stop them. The reason why it wasn't destroyed was because the spiritual opportunity in this place wasn't flourishing. Even if it was occupied, it would be useless. Moreover, it was also because they were afraid that there would be cultivators from the devil sect or demon cultivators occupying this place and causing trouble. Most of the cultivators here had already lost their morale, so they might as well leave it. However, Yuxiao School didn't completely ignore them. As long as there were people who cultivated to the third stage of Yuanying realm, they would definitely try to get rid of them, in case a scourge like Xiaozhu was born again. The more Zhou Ruiying thought about it, the more she felt that this matter wasn't simple. She couldn't help but frown. She had originally thought that by sending a third stage realm elder over, she would be able to settle this matter. But if the devil sect were to take action, they would probably be waiting for her to come knocking on their door. Although Zhou Zishang was from the main branch, but in terms of status in the sect, he was just an ordinary elder. But if a third-stage realm clansman was defeated outside, then the Zhou family's reputation would be tarnished. She gave a humph and said, "Looks like I have to take action personally this time." She opened her mouth and gently blew out a breath of air. It suddenly spun in the main hall and the white air was like a brocade as it slowly gathered together. In the end, it turned into a clone that looked exactly like her. Because of this clone needed to exhaust a portion of one's blood, essence, and vitality. If it was destroyed by someone, it couldn't be retrieved, so there were very few people who refined it. But she was in charge of the clan's affairs and usually needed to cultivate, so she needed a clone to run around for her and guide her disciples. Her previous clone had been destroyed by Sun Jian, and after that, she spent over 100 years before she managed to refine this one. With a thought, that clone bowed to her and flew up into the sky, out of the Mochi Jade Cliff, and in a flash of light, it shot towards the direction of the Fengling Ocean. In the small world, Chu Shang circled around for half a day and consecutively explored a few places where spiritual vigor flourished, but he still couldn't find Suihua's whereabouts. He raised his eyes and looked around. This small world was extremely huge and he didn't know how many thousands of miles it extended. If the other party had the intention to hide, even if he used another 10 days to half a month, there might not be any results. If he couldn't find him, then forget it. But if this person took the opportunity to go to the outside world, then it would be a waste of time here. He considered and decided to simply wait for the rabbit by the tree stump, so he went to wait outside. No matter what the people who entered the realm obtained, they would eventually have to leave. He only needed to stand guard outside the door. Even if he had to wait a little longer, it was still better than searching around aimlessly in the outside world. With this thought in mind, he drove the light and flew towards the exit. In less than half a day, he arrived at his destination and with a leap, he easily went out of the door. At this time, in the underground palace outside, Elder Wen had already taken out the formation diagram from the Cicada Palace and set it up outside the stone mirror. He personally guarded the northern position, while the other 3 elders each guarded one side. At this moment, an elder on the west side felt that someone came out and said, "Elders, there's movement on the mirror, be careful." Elder Wen just now had been paying attention to the spirit sea. When he heard this, he didn't dare to be careless. He turned around and said, "Did you see clearly who came out? Is it the palace lord?" The elder took a few glances and said angrily, "If it's not the palace lord, then it's the person who just now bullied us." Elder Wen was stunned at first, then he laughed out loud. There was a hint of murderous intent in his voice. "I've been waiting for this person. Today, he won't be able to come and go. Everyone, follow me and turn the formation map." The other 3 had suffered a great loss just now that they had the chance, they naturally wanted to get back at them. Because they knew that the opponent wasn't simple, they all revolved their mana and activated the formation chi with all their might. On the 4 sides, thousands of gods in leather and armor appeared. They were as tall as mountains and each held a weapon as they charged down. As Chu Shang looked down on the cultivators of the Fengling Ocean, he didn't take any precautions when he came out. But when he stepped out of the door, he suddenly realized that something was wrong. He wanted to turn around but realized that there was no way out. He didn't know that he had fallen into the formation. Suddenly, he heard the sounds of killing behind him. When he turned around, he saw thousands of gods charging over from different directions. He roared and a dark light appeared behind him. He turned around and killed all of them. But in the next moment, wind, fire, thunder and lightning suddenly surged in the formation. It shook the heaven and earth and turned upside down. He didn't know why, but he suddenly fell into a trance and was swept into it. R1152. Chapter 968. Chu Shang spun a few rounds in the wind. Dozens of blazing golden rays landed on his body. Luckily, the protective treasure light was not gone and he was not hurt. After a few breaths, he suddenly woke up. He was shocked. Just now, his spirit must have been bewitched. That was why the formation could hit him so easily. In Shenmen, there were very few such techniques. On the other hand, the devil sect often had techniques to attack the spirit. After suffering this loss, he stopped underestimating them. He silently chanted a calming true formula and guarded his mind. Instantly, his mind was clear. Now that he was prepared, although there were a few gusts of wind blowing, he did not fall into a coma like just now because he held his mind. However, the attacks from the formation kept falling. There were thunder and lightning everywhere, water and fire were flying. It was as if many of his peers were attacking him but they could not find their opponents. He could only use his talisman and try his best to hold up the protective treasure light to defend himself. But he also knew that as long as the spiritual vigor was not exhausted, the chi of the formation could be produced continuously until his mana was exhausted and he died. The most important thing now was to find a way out. But he did not know about formations, so he could only rush left and right. When the 4 elders of Chan Palace saw him like this, their faces were filled with joy. One of them said, "So this person does not know about formations. He should die here." Elder Windauren said, "Everyone, did you notice that this formation map seems to be more powerful?" Another elder added, "Maybe it's because of the abundance of spiritual vigor." Everyone agreed. This illuminating formation diagram was originally passed down by the founder of the Chan Palace. There was no mention of it, because its protective power was similar to the great formation of the Mountain Gate. Therefore, for thousands of years, it was used to guard the palace and had no other use. But when the door of 2 worlds was opened, the spiritual vigor gathered and revealed its true power. The attacks grew stronger and stronger. With just the 4 of them, Chu Shang was forced to the point where he could not fight back. He could only barely protect his body. At this moment, Zhou Ruing had already reached the Fengling Ocean. She looked at the howling fierce wind barrier in front of her, stretched out her slender hand and pressed down. At this moment, the violent wind that had been here for tens of thousands of years was actually suppressed by her pure magic power. Then, with a sway of his body, he transformed into a streak of light and flew over. Without her suppressing it, the wind rose again. However, when she entered the sea realm, she immediately noticed something strange. She turned around and saw a ray of light shooting into the sky. She couldn't help but exclaim, "A small realm portal?" Almost instantly, the thought of searching for Zhou Zishang's whereabouts was thrown to the back of her mind. Compared to a dead disciple, a small world was undoubtedly more valuable. With a thought, the body turned, the rainbow crossed the light clouds. In the blink of an eye, she arrived in the sky above Stone Forest Island. Seeing that there was a formation blocking her way, she casually waved her sleeve, and a mountainous supernatural power instantly pressed down. However, this attack only caused the formation to shake slightly. A moment later, it returned to its original appearance and did not disperse. Zhou Ruing exclaimed in surprise. She had originally thought that she would be able to break an ordinary formation with a wave of her hand, but she had never expected that her attack would only cause the formation to shake slightly. This caused her to be extremely surprised, and after carefully sensing it, she immediately understood the reason behind it. The formation below connected the mountains and rivers in all directions. The spiritual vigor of the entire Fengling Ocean was almost twisted into one. Any external force that came would be equivalent to colliding with the sea realm. It wasn't that she couldn't destroy the entire Fenglinghai. If she came with her real body, it would be as easy as raising her hand. However, if she used this clone, it would take at least a few days. She didn't have the patience to wait like that, so she used another drastic method. She took out a spell and cut off the spiritual vigor in all directions. The spiritual light below instantly dimmed. At this moment, she raised her finger and lightly poked the formation mechanism. Chu Shang had been trapped in the formation for a long time. He thought that he had no way out today. He originally wanted to hold on for a few more hours before asking for mercy. After he got out, he would kill this group of people. However, at this moment, he suddenly saw a bright light in front of him. There was actually an extra way out. He was instantly overjoyed. He did not even have time to think about what was going on. Without a moment's delay, he let out a roar and escaped outside. Zhou Ruiying saw a ray of light coming up and thought that the cultivator below was desperate. She could not be bothered to look. With a casual flick of her finger, a ball of dazzling starlight swept across the sky. It brushed past Chu Shang's body and instantly turned his flesh and blood into nothingness. The few elders of Chan Palace below saw that a third-stage cultivator was actually killed in a flick of a finger. They cried out involuntarily, "Someone from the heavens abode?" The four of them were extremely shocked. They did not dare to stay here any longer. In just a moment, they all pounced forward and hid in the small world. Only Elder Wen was still conscious. Before he entered the stone mirror, he did not forget to wave his hand and kept the slightly damaged formation map. Zhou Ruiying walked slowly. In her eyes, the few people of Chan Palace were like insects. They could be dealt with easily. It was not worth her effort to chase after them. After she landed, she still had the time to look at the two altars below. With just a glance, she saw many clues. Looking at the shape, it looks very much like the work of the West Continent cultivators from 10,000 years ago. It must be a small world that has survived from the ancient times until now. She raised her hand again and caught a spiritual vigor. After a slight identification, she immediately concluded that there must be a pill jade here. Her heart, however, was filled with joy. Just now, she had given up quite a number of pill jade. Although she said that she did not mind, she felt her heart ache. But this trip might be able to make up for it. She took a few steps forward and went into the stone mirror. She raised her hand and pushed, but was blocked by an invisible force. She could not enter. She was not surprised. The mana of the heavens abode cultivators was too strong. They could easily destroy the mountains and land. This must be a restriction set by the almighty cultivator who opened up this small world in the past. It did not allow cultivators with such cultivation to enter. Even though she was just a clone now, her mana was still far stronger than the Yuanying cultivators. However, this small world was dead. As long as she put in some effort, there would be a way to enter. First, she pressed lightly and her mana surged out. The door shook and looked like it was about to shatter. She quickly retracted it and thought to herself, "Since I can't attack by force, I can only use gentle methods. But I'll have to delay here for a while." The four elders of Chan Palace reached the inner room and were still in shock. Elder Wen sighed and said, "We need to report this to the palace master." An elder had a sorrowful expression as if he was already in despair. He said, "What's the use? That is the enlightened abode. Just now, it's not like Elder Wen didn't see it. Even a third-stage cultivator could not withstand a single blow from him, let alone us." Elder Wen said in a low voice, "Looking at the appearance of that enlightened abode, he should be the Yuxiao School's abode's Zhou Ruiying. But why would the enlightened abode come personally? I thought it was just a clone." Elder Daoran said, "Even if it's a clone, it's not something we can fight against. Moreover, we are not enemies with the Yuxiao School. There's no reason for them to let us go." Elder Wen comforted everyone. "That fellow Taoist Zhou is from the Zhou clan. He seems to be on good terms with the palace master. Maybe he can talk to me." When this was said, a glimmer of hope rose in everyone's heart. After a few more whispers, they sent out a red talisman. Xiao Shun was at the bottom of the stone mountain. She had been digging for a few days, but she still hadn't found the underground palace. Now that she received the red talisman, she was shocked. This talisman would only be used in a life and death situation. She didn't care about searching for treasures and hurried back with the 3 elders beside her. When she saw them, she saw that they looked dispirited and disheveled. She asked in surprise, "Elders, what happened?" Elder Wen smiled bitterly and came up to them to tell them what happened outside. When Xiao Shen heard this, her jade face also turned pale. But she was still calm and said, "It must be that fellow Taoist Zhou saw this small world and reported it to the sect, causing the abode to come and seize this small world. But why is he so anxious? I have no intention of monopolizing this place. At worst, I'll just give it up." Elder Wen Daoren said, "Can you ask that fellow Taoist Zhou to intervene?" Xiao Shen said, "We can try, but I don't know where he went." Elder Wen Daoren said, "Why don't we split up and look for him?" All the elders expressed their approval. But at this moment, someone in the sky said, "This person is already dead, there's no need to look for him." Everyone looked up and saw a handsome cultivator standing in the sky. There was a vertical mark in between his eyebrows. Elder Wen recognized that it was the person they saw on the sea that was suspected to be a cultivator from the Devil's Doctrine. Now that they had the advantage in numbers, he wasn't afraid. He stood up and asked in surprise, "How did you know?" Wei Zihong said, "Because I killed him with my own hands." Elder Wen took 2 steps back and looked at him up and down. He said with a trembling voice, "You dare to kill a Yu Xiao disciple?" Wei Zihong looked at him and said, "So what if he's a Yu Xiao disciple? If he's killed, then he's killed. There's no need to make such a fuss." Elder Wen composed himself and cupped his hands together. "May I know how to address you, sir?" Wei Zihong raised his head and said in a sonorous voice, "Qinsong School, 6th disciple of Hall Master Du Zhen, Wei Zihong." Hall Master Du Zhen? Qinsong School Zhenren Zhang? The people of Chan Palace were astonished when they heard this. 10 years ago, the battle between Zhang Yan and Yan Changxing could be said to have shaken the heavens and the earth. Many cultivators also knew the might of the people of Dongtian because of this battle. Even if they were far away on the Feng Linghai, they could still feel the monstrous mana that could destroy continents, and all of them were deeply terrified. Xiao Shen composed herself and came up to bow. "So it's Hall Master Du Zhen's disciple. Xiao Shen greets you." The few elders also quickly came up to greet him. Wei Zihong looked at them and saw that they were avoiding his gaze. He laughed mockingly and said, "Just now, are you thinking that I killed someone and it has nothing to do with you? That Zhou Ruing won't make things difficult for you? Or maybe you can work together to capture me and present me to Zhou Ruing. Maybe you can avoid a disaster?" The people of Chan Palace hurriedly said, "We don't dare, we don't dare." To be fair, they did have this thought just now. However, Wei Zihong's background was too great and they couldn't afford to offend him. Wei Zihong sneered a few times and did not expose them. Xiao Shen bowed again and said, "Zhenren Wei, we have a feud with Yu Xiao School. Since fellow Zhou is dead, I don't think that Zhenren Zhou will let us go. Zhenren Wei, please show us the way." Wei Zihong said, "It's not impossible, but are you willing?" At this time, Xiao Shen had to grasp even the slightest bit of hope and said, "Zhenren, please show us." Wei Zihong said calmly, "This method is easy. Make an oath and enter my sect. This way, you will be from the same sect. I will try to protect you." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.